Out front next, breaking news. The U.S. attacks Iran tonight. Trump's payback for the downing of an Apache helicopter with 2 pilots. Iran now retaliating. We are live on the ground in Tehran tonight. And it is election night in America. Polls are just closing in a race putting Trump's power to the test tonight. This is a pick for governor. And it pull out a win in South Carolina. And why is Lindsey Graham right now in one of the toughest fights of his career tonight? Also breaking, we're about to get the first look at whether Maine Senate candidate Graham Plattner can survive the controversies. Polls are about to close there, too. We're going to bring you the results as they come in this hour. John King is at the Magic Wall. Let's go out front. And good evening. I'm Erin Burnett. And out front tonight, we have breaking news. The U.S. attacking Iran. Iran now retaliating. A dangerous escalation in the war that's now on day 102. Tehran claiming it's firing missiles and drones towards U.S. targets. An attack after CENTCOM confirms the U.S. hit a number of targets in Iran. So this has been a back and forth. Multiple explosions reported now along the Strait of Hormuz. And it all started, Trump says, when Iran shot down a U.S. Apache helicopter as it patrolled the crucial waterway. And that was a significant strike, maybe at the hands of an Iranian Shahed drone, coming amidst a ceasefire that was broken 2 days ago. With missiles hitting back and forth once again between Iran and Israel. The president tonight telling ABC's Jonathan Karl that this is a response to what they did with our helicopter last night. And I believe the response should be very strong, very powerful, and that's what this one is. Now, this is the first time in the war that Apache's gone down by a country whose military, right, Trump claims to have obliterated. Certainly when it comes to things like the Navy and the Strait, it's been obliterated or left at the bottom of the sea many times, according to Trump. The attack coming just hours after Trump said the U.S. would be declaring victory in Iran in the next 2 weeks, and also that there was a deal, the cusp of a deal with Iran, which is a claim, in fact, that Trump has now made at least 38 times since the war began.
They're begging to make a deal.
I think they want to make a deal very badly.
Iran is dying to make a deal.
We're going to end that war very quickly. They want to make a deal so badly.
We're close to a very good deal.
We're in the final throes of what will be a very, very good deal.
Where does that deal stand tonight? Well, in a moment, we're going to take you live to the ground in Tehran. But first, I want to go straight to Kristen Holmes because she's out front live outside the White House. And Kristen, now a back and a forth happening in the Strait of Hormuz between the U.S. and Iran. I mean, what are you learning about the scope of the strikes this hour?
Yeah, Erin, it certainly doesn't seem as though they're moving in the right direction in terms of some kind of a peace deal. But what I'm told is that right now there is a limited scope when it comes to these strikes. They're looking at military targets along the Strait of Hormuz, but we are told that they are expecting more strikes throughout the evening. Now, one of the things that we have been told was that this was meant to be somewhat of a warning shot fired to Iran after the downing of that Apache, and that they don't think long-term this is going to affect any of those negotiations. Now, it's unclear whether or not they noted that Iran was going to retaliate and retaliate so quickly. We saw a post from Iran's foreign minister saying that any strike from the U.S. would essentially be countered. Now, the U.S. is still maintaining that it is somewhat optimistic about these negotiations, about reaching a peace deal. However, it's unclear whether or not that 2 to 3 day timeline, which President Trump laid out last night, still holds. Of course, we had heard that kind of timeline before, and we are still in the midst of this no longer even ceasefire as the two sides are trading strikes.
Yeah, absolutely. And days away from a deal for 102 days. Thank you very much, Kristen Holmes. I want to go to Fred Pleitgen. He's live on the ground in Tehran. So actually there. And Fred, you know, obviously where you're standing, 2:30 in the morning, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, says they're launching missiles and drones toward U.S. targets in the region. You're actually there and able to tell us what the Iranian regime is thinking, or what they're telling you. What are you learning?
Well, they're saying that there's going to be a powerful response to this. They generally have said, Erin, that there's going to be a powerful response to any sort of strikes that happen against Iranian territory. And you're absolutely right. The IRGC has already come out and said that they've launched missiles and drones towards what they call U.S. military targets in the region. It's unclear what exactly is under fire at this point in time. It's quite interesting because about 30 minutes ago, the Iranian foreign minister also came out with a new post on X saying, quote, despite its defeats on the battlefield battlefield, the U.S. opted to test our determination. Our powerful armed forces will leave no attack or threat unanswered. Leave our region if you want to be safe. So that coming just a couple of minutes ago from the Iranian foreign minister, obviously sounding very different than a possible peace deal being very close at this point in
All right, it looks like Fred was
Well,
finished. There we go. Okay. Looks like we've lost Fred's shot there. Obviously, you can imagine having communications to Tehran is not the easiest thing. But we're very grateful that Fred is there. As many of you may know, he was with incredible journalism as the war began. Out front now, retired Navy Admiral William McRaven. His storied military career includes organizing and overseeing the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. He is also the author now of the new book, Duty, Honor, Country, and Life, a tribute to the American spirit. Something important to read and to think about as we reach this 250th anniversary as a nation. Admiral McRaven, I want to begin with the breaking news here. Though the U.S. striking Iran, Trump says that Iran took out one of America's elite Apache helicopters, and then there's this back and forth. And you heard what Fred was just reporting before that communications issue when he was reporting that the foreign minister is threatening the U.S., saying our powerful armed forces will leave no attack or threat unanswered. Leave our region if you want to be safe. The IRGC is retaliating. What do you see happening here, Admiral?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, this ceasefire is beginning to escalate, and this is not what the administration wants. Trump truly wants a deal, and I actually think the Iranians want a deal. But until we can stop shooting at each other, nobody's going to come to the negotiating table. I've been saying for quite some time that the president needs to think about his kind of long-term strategic goals, and those should be, first and foremost, to get the strait open. The only way that strait's going to get open is if the president lifts the blockade under the auspices that the Iranians have got to open the straits, and then sit down and begin the long-term negotiations that are going to be required for the highly enriched uranium, the state sponsor of terrorism, and all the things that the Iranian regime has been doing that we want to put in better balance.
Yeah, and of course, the irony of what you say, the first strategic goal is to return to the way things were before the war started, at least when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz itself, right, with reopening that. It does come in the context of this deal, Admiral, where Trump, as I said, the number that we counted is at least 38 times over the past couple months. He has said that a deal with Iran was close to being finalized, right? There's a deal, and we know it often comes over the weekend. It comes ahead of the market opening. I played a few of those claims a few moments ago. But, you say you believe the Iranians also want a deal as well. How do you think they view, though, the reality that it is now very obvious to anyone on this planet that Trump really wants to make a deal?
Yeah, of course, one of the Iranian stipulations for coming to the negotiating table was for the fighting between Hezbollah and Israel to stop. And that has continued, which is why you've heard about the very contentious phone call that President Trump had with Prime Minister Netanyahu. You've seen the continual, bombardment going back and forth between Israel and Hezbollah. And, of course, this is what precipitated the Iranian attack the other day and then the counterattack by the Israelis. So, unfortunately, the president really has a lot of things going on here. He's got to convince the Israelis, yes, they have the right to self-protection. They need to protect themselves, but we've got to figure out a way to kind of broker some sort of ceasefire in Lebanon so that can be one of the stipulations that we kind of take off the table. Then the next thing is, we've got to figure out a way where we convince the Iranians that we will lift the blockade if they open the straits, and then sit down and begin the long-term and the hard negotiations that will come.
Yeah, and long and hard, as you said, and with the prior deal, of course, we know it took years to get it done.
Right.
Now, Trump's claims of an imminent deal, as you know, Admiral, have been preceded by bombastic rhetoric that was unsettling to everyone. From both Trump as well as the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Here are just a few things that they've said to remind everybody of those moments where your heart would be in your throat many times in the early days of this war.
I had to do a little stopover in Iran, and we had to knock the hell out of them.
We negotiate with bombs.
We just keep bombing our little hearts out.
Death and destruction from the sky all day long.
That last threat from the Defense Secretary, death and destruction from the sky all day long, also comes in the context of Trump and the Easter Post, which of course is unforgettable, Admiral, where the president wrote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." I'm thinking in the context of the fact that you're writing a book in honor of America's 250th anniversary. What are the consequences on the world stage for an American president and the leader of its military, his defense secretary, to be speaking in this way?
Well, certainly the rhetoric doesn't help. It certainly doesn't help in the process of the negotiations. As I mentioned before, at the end of the day, Trump wants to broker a deal with the Iranians. And the deal has got to begin with opening the straits. And so he's got to get them to the negotiating table. He's got to provide some sort of incentive that opens the straits and brings the Iranians to the negotiating table. The rhetoric won't help. But to your point about my book, Duty, Honor, Country, and Life, it really is about the incredible soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that I worked with over my 37 years. And it's those same soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that are out there in the Gulf right now responding to the threats from Iran. So I hope when people read this book, they'll realize how incredible the young men and women of this country are, not just in the military, but frankly, everywhere I go in the country.
And that's an optimistic note, I think, that gives people heart. Your book is a collection of speeches, letters, even poems, frankly, Admiral, that you've written over the years, which I think is important and I hope inspirational to many young women and men. But ahead of the country's 250th birthday, at one point you write, keeping our democracy alive past 250 years will not be easy. It will require our leaders to be men and women of integrity, the same integrity that I saw in public servants who raised their voices against corruption, malfeasance, and the mistreatment of their fellow Americans. It's a poignant statement in the context of the moment in which we're having this conversation. Admiral, do you think American democracy is in danger right now?
Look, I am worried about American democracy, but American democracy has always been this grand experiment, Aaron. And the fact of the matter is, if we're going to keep the American democracy moving for another 250 years, then we have to expect better from our leaders. Our leaders that are in the administration today, the ones in the next election, and on and on and on. And not just at, we need to expect better from our leaders at the local, state, and federal level. That's what will move our democracy forward. That's what will keep it in place 250 years from now.
All right. Thank you very much, Admiral McRaven. And I hope everyone will obviously take a look at your new book, as well as your original one, Make Your Bed, and other important things to know in life, which, as I said, I know is being read in my family. Thank you so much, Admiral.
Thank you.
And next, breaking news, polls just closing in a race that's testing Trump's influence over the Republican Party tonight. This is in South Carolina. Can Trump's pick pull out a win? John King is standing by with new results. Plus, polls also closing in Maine. Democrats on edge right now, waiting to see how embattled Senate candidate Graham Plattner weathers the string of controversies he's facing. And a website tied to the Trump family now is selling a $12,000 coin with, shockingly, President Trump's face on it. The website says it's to celebrate America's 250th anniversary. Breaking news on this election night in America. Polls closing moments ago in South Carolina, where Trump is facing a major test tonight of whether his candidate for governor will win. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette is facing a crowded primary, including a challenge from Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who, of course, Trump has aggressively snubbed. And after two high-profile Trump candidates, L.A. mayoral candidate Spencer Pratt and Iowa gubernatorial candidate Representative Randy Feenstra lost, the big question is, how will Trump fare in the test in South Carolina tonight? Also in South Carolina, surprisingly, I mean, when you talk about incumbent, I mean, this defines the word incumbent. Lindsey Graham is fighting off a Republican challenger. Graham has represented, obviously, a deep red South Carolina for more than 2 decades. He has never been in a runoff, which could happen this year if he doesn't get 50% of the vote. How in the world is that even in question? Well, a lot of the commentary he has been making during the war is part of the reason. He does, though, have the endorsement of Trump. And in the last weeks of the race, he has spent big money to try to keep his seat. He's been on defense to try to prevent this runoff, as I said, in part because of comments he's made about the war with Iran and Israel. And, of course, we're also watching one of the most talked about races right now, which is the Democratic Senate primary in Maine, where Graham Plattner is expected to prevail. Now, whether he can beat incumbent Republican Susan Collins is what this is about, and that may come down to the turnout and enthusiasm that we see in the primary tonight. His performance will be closely watched because for Democrats, the main Senate race is crucial if they are going to regain control of the Senate. All right, Arlette Saenz is at Plattner's campaign headquarters in Blue Hill, Maine, and Diane Gallagher is in South Carolina, where we are standing by for the first results, which could come here in the next few seconds. But we've also got David Axelrod, Maura Gillespie, Ested Herndon, and Mark Sanford, also all here standing by. Let's start with you, though, Diane, because polls have now closed in South Carolina. And what are you learning here?
That's right, Aaron. Polls just closed, which means we had to come outside from the polling place we were so they could get everything together, get it to the county election seat. That's happening all across the state right now. Of course, most of the eyes watching that South Carolina GOP gubernatorial race here, which has really just a stacked field of 5 candidates, including the Lieutenant Governor Pamela Abbott, who is endorsed by Donald Trump, the longtime Attorney General Alan Wilson, 2 sitting members of Congress, and Ralph Norman and Nancy Mace, and businessman Rahm Reddy. A lot of the questions about the Trump endorsement and whether or not Abbott's going to get a Trump bump or not. And I will tell you, talking to voters here today, there is no clear leader, which is what we've seen in a lot of polling here in the state locally as well. We spoke to people who say that they loved President Trump but had already made their decision about their candidate before the endorsement came down, and there was nothing in his endorsement that caused them to want to switch up candidates. Now, because South Carolina requires 50% of the vote to avoid a runoff, we are likely heading to one in this particular race. And many of the voters I spoke to here said that if Abbott were to make that runoff, at that point, they may then put more stock in Donald Trump's endorsement. But again, it would depend on who she was going up against. Each one of these candidates, all 5 of them, have tried to align themselves as closely with the president's agenda as they can. Congresswoman Mace calling herself Trump in high heels and MAGA Mace. Of course, she did not get that endorsement, but it has not stopped any of the candidates from saying that they are all about the Trump administration. You mentioned the Graham race. Just really quickly, there are 6 Republicans, including Lindsey Graham, running for U.S. Senate here. There is talk. We only found 2 or 3 people who said they voted for Lindsey Graham. Most of them said, though, they weren't really sure about the person they voted for against him. They just didn't want to vote for Graham again.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch that. I mean, it's think about the moment in history we're at for Lindsey Graham. All right, thank you very much, Diane. We're going to be going back to you. I do, just before we go to Maine, want to put that board up again that we had put up for just a second. Very first votes coming in South Carolina, fewer than 1,000 counted. So take it with that grain of salt. But here's what you have. You have Alan Wilson right now, 23 votes ahead. So that's why I'm emphasizing how very few votes this is. Pamela Abbott is the lieutenant governor, the Trump-endorsed candidate. But you got to, we'll keep a close eye on this as more votes come in these next few minutes here. Let's go now to Arlette Saenz, who is in Blue Hill, Maine. That is Graham Plattner's headquarters there. And Arlette, polls about to close where you are. So what is the mood inside the room right now, where all eyes are going to be on what is turnout, what is enthusiasm on the heels of these controversies surrounding Plattner?
Well, Aaron, attendees are starting to fill in this gymnasium in the very county where Graham Plattner is from, as they hope to hear a victory speech from their chosen candidate this evening. Plattner is favored to win this Democratic primary, but what we will be watching very closely is the margin of that victory, which could offer a gauge of how much enthusiasm he does or does not have within the Democratic Party after those scandals that have come out around his campaign. Now, we spoke to a mix of voters throughout the day, and they really had differing views about Plattner's candidacy and viability in this campaign going forward. We spoke to people who voted for Plattner or sticking with him, but others who said that they voted for Janet Mills, the state's governor, who has suspended her campaign, but whose name is still on the ballot. Take a listen to 2 of those voters on opposing sides that we spoke to earlier.
In terms of Mr. Plattner, it's how many strikes do we need against the guy? I don't think he's ready to be a senator.
He's absolutely going to win. I have no doubt. Mainers are not falling for this political crap. And frankly, the more people from away that come and try to influence our thoughts, the more we dig in with what we really believe.
Now, the biggest test for Plattner will come in November, where he is expected to face off against Republican Senator Susan Collins. Republicans have made clear that they plan to put Plattner's controversies front and center in their messaging against him in this campaign. A Democratic primary electorate is far different than a general electorate, so Plattner will have some work to do in the coming months if he wants to try to overcome some of the concerns about the controversies here. But this is one of those states that will be crucially watched until the very end, as it could determine the makeup of the Senate next year. Aaron.
All right, Arlette, thank you very much at Plattner's headquarters as we await for results there. Everyone's here with me. So, David, we'll put those results up in South Carolina very, very early. Let's see if we get a few more votes in there. But we had, there you go. I think we've doubled the number that we had. Alan Wilson is now ahead. Now, look, you've got 5 people running. We're going to start to see this flip up and down because we're very early on. Pamela Abbott, though, is the lieutenant governor. That is the Trump-backed candidate, and that is the test for Trump tonight. How important is it for Trump that she win?
You know, I think it will be added to the list of, it's so unusual for Trump not to win that anytime somebody doesn't, it's the question comes up, is he losing his influence with Republican voters? I wouldn't read too much. I defer to the governor on this. I wouldn't read too much of it. Too much into that. I don't know how much he leaned into this. When he leans in, it tends to make a difference. We saw it in Texas. We saw it in Louisiana. This didn't seem one in which he was leaning real hard.
Leaning in too heavily. What about, Governor, you served obviously 2 terms as governor, so you've been through this. But there's also the GOP Senate race and Lindsey Graham. And it was interesting with Diane's reporting that some people were saying they literally were just voting to vote against Lindsey Graham.
I think that's real. I think that Lindsey, had he drawn a real opponent, would have been in profound trouble. I think he's in trouble the fact that we're having this conversation. I've been through my share of runoffs in South Carolina. They are not fun. I mean, it's a blood sport. I mean, it's sort of gladiator style. Whoever sort of walks out alive wins it. But, I mean, it'll be a rough 2 weeks if Mark ends up. I mean, they will bring you hear talk of the president coming in if Mark ends up in that runoff with Lindsey. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, obviously early on, he's ahead. Lindsey Graham's ahead by a lot now. But again, you're looking at just a few thousand votes. You can see 1%, I believe. Need my glasses. 1% of the vote is in instead, so I'm not going to read anything into that at this point. But it is incredible that we're having this conversation. And in part, it comes from Lindsey Graham's fealty to Trump and a lot of the commentary that he has made in the past few months on the Iran war and Israel's importance compared to voters in South Carolina's importance to Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, I mean, he's run afoul of both the right. And this has been building for a while. I remember being in Myrtle Beach 4 or 5 years ago with a different Lindsey Graham challenger, and there was still that kind of air because he was softer on immigration issues than kind of that base wanted. There's been multiple efforts, and I think to the governor's point, what Trump really did was insulate him from maybe a more stronger challenger. It's kind of a tale of 2 shapeshifters. I think an interesting thing in that governor's race is how Donald Trump kind of punished Nancy Mace, particularly for their vote to release the Epstein files, and I think that's someone who has tried to tie herself to him so closely, and you see how in that break, specifically on that issue, he has made, I think, obviously the conscious choice to not only endorse her opponent, but to make sure folks knew he was sidelining her.
I just wonder, in both parties and in this country, there is this great divide today, and it is establishment candidates versus anti-establishment candidates. And Lindsey Graham he's been around forever. Yeah. He is an establishment candidate. I think he built his relationship with Trump as a firewall against the anti-establishment movement. But I'm not sure voters really see him that way.
Well, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I was going to say is that which version of Lindsey Graham are you talking about? There's been many iterations of Lindsey Graham. He was a John McCain best friend. Mm-hmm. He was somebody who then turned and said that he was all for Trump and has been a champion for Trump. And then really, I think MAGA got upset when he was talking about, I'll bomb anyone and everyone. And so this idea that there is this idea within the MAGA cohorts that Lindsey Graham is partially the reason that Donald Trump has gone after and attacked and bombed, the cartel boats and Iran and different things. And so I do think that's coming back to bite him in a way that MAGA is not happy with. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing this against Donald Trump. They're doing this against Lindsey Graham.
You've worked for House Speaker John Boehner, also Adam Kinzinger. I'm curious in the context of what you just said about Nancy Mace, though. Nancy Mace describing herself as Trump in high heels, but Trump turned on her over the Epstein files. It's like he turned on Thomas Massie. You know, they would say, oh, well, Thomas Massie also didn't vote with him on the war. It was about the Epstein files when he had these original shifts on people. You know, what does that say to you? That so much of this for Trump comes down to Epstein?
But it also comes down to it's a personal thing for Trump, because he's also not endorsed Ralph Norman. And so because of his support for Nikki Haley, you know, he has these vendettas that he holds on to, and he won't let them go. But I do think when you talk about the Epstein files, that is also something that one feels very strongly about. And we watched as Pam Bondi passed the buck to Todd Blanche and said that it's his fault. Let's go have him deal with it. MAGA's not going to forget that either, but also the general public's not going to forget the fact that that has been withheld, and we really haven't gotten answers for a lot of things. We also haven't gotten answers on why Ghislaine Maxwell is sitting in a cushy prison, right? There are questions that people want answers to, and we're still being denied. And from a campaign that ran on transparency, not having that come to fruition is very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing. Plattner, so obviously, you know, the other person on the ballot had already gotten out of the race, so it's not really a race. But what does matter is what tonight? Turnout, what can you look at to see?
I think you can look at the margins. Like the last polling we had him at 70-something percent, 60-something percent to her 24 when she was more campaigning high. Do you see people come out on her side? But I really think this is a question of what happens going forward. Yeah. Is there more information that comes out about him, I think, is the principal question. But, you know, I think what that voter shared in the package is a real sentiment. Plattner, and I think to David's point, these kind of anti-establishment candidates have made have made the targets against them part of their appeal, right? Like they're saying in part of thumbing your nose at Washington is not just the policies that kind of prioritize the working class, but sending a person they don't think is supposed to be there. That's built in the Plattner campaign.
And do you see that in South Carolina too?
Absolutely. I mean, to your point, to David's point, the anti-establishment thing is a big deal in this governor's race. For instance, Ram Reddy of the last week has been surging. I mean, really moving. He just had $400,000 run against him in negative ads by, Ralph Norman and crew, but that may have stopped it. But the anti-establishment fervor is alive and well, I suspect, to your point, across the country, but you really feel it in South Carolina. Yeah. And were it not for those ads, were it not for the Trump endorsement, I think Rahm would have ended up in this runoff. I don't think
I think Plattner is counting the minutes to turn this race on Susan Collins, and I think you're going to probably hear that tonight.
Yeah. All right. Everyone stay with me. You're going to be with us here as we continue our breaking news coverage of Election Night in America. Live pictures out of Los Angeles, because this is the witching hour every night. This is when we get a big pile of votes from that room. So can we make a governor's call? We'll see. We could determine whether Republican Steve Hilton will advance to the runoff or not. Plus, Trump today dismissing what has become one of the biggest issues for voters this election year. Breaking news, we're watching whether a Trump-backed candidate in South Carolina will win in tonight's primary for governor after Trump's preferred candidates in Iowa and California recently lost. As a major Trump ally, Lindsey Graham, the senator there, is fighting a crowded primary field, trying to avoid being forced into a runoff election for the first time in his Senate career. So let's go to John King. He's at the Magic Wall out front. And John, Trump backing South Carolina's lieutenant governor in the race there. So how is she doing right now as we're starting to see votes populate the screen?
She's in the lead right now, but it's very, very early, number one. Let's start there. We only have about 3% of the vote in, Aaron, so we need to be very careful. This is just a few precincts in a few counties. You see them lighting up in here. I'll go through it. And the other point is, if you don't get to 50% plus one, you have a runoff. But the lieutenant governor is Trump's endorsed candidate. You see she's on top right now. The state attorney general, Ellen Wilson, is second. Businessman Ram Reddy is running third. I heard the former governor talking earlier about the anti-establishment sentiment we see all over the country. Two members of Congress, Ralph Norman and Nancy Mace, at the bottom of the pack right now. Forgive me, I moved that over a little bit. Let's come back over. But again, it's only 3% of the race as it comes in. So number one, it looks like if the two members of Congress stay down there, you're going to have turnover in Congress anyway. The question is whether they can move on up. It's too early to make the call again. And with 3%, you would say, oh, they're going to a runoff, but it's 3%. So check back in. We'll let the count go on.
All right. And so now let's talk about Lindsey Graham. Trump's ally, has been his fierce ally on many issues recently, but specifically the Iran war. So he's now facing 5 opponents in his primary, also needs a 50% of the vote to avoid a runoff. So where do things stand there for Senator Graham?
So flip side of the same explanation. He's way ahead right now, but everybody calm down. If he's only 3% of the vote in, if he stays there against a more conservative candidate, Mark Lynch, if Lindsey Graham can stay above 50, he will avoid that runoff. But at 3% of the vote, again, very early returns. He's the incumbent senator, so there's nothing you can make of it except if you're Lindsey Graham, you want to stay up there. But as more votes come in, we'll see if he does.
All right, John, I'm about to ask you a question here, but first, we do have some breaking news. We can make a projection in the race for governor in the state of California now that Steve Hilton will be advancing to the general election. So he will be advancing along with Javier Becerra. That means that Tom Steyer will not advance to the general election. But this means that Republican Steve Hilton will advance in the California race for governor to the general election. And you can see that is the vote count here that we are making this projection here at CNN based on right now. So, John, we saw Steve Hilton maintain that lead. Steyer had cut into it a little bit. But what do you see that stands out now that these results are in California with Becerra and Hilton advancing in the gubernatorial race?
Several things to think about as you go through this here. Number one, unless you are a supporter of Tom Steyer, and this is a defeat and you're bruised by this and you're upset by this, other Democrats are happy that you have a Democrat and a Republican running against each other in November, because California doesn't mean Mr. Hilton can't win. This is a volatile year. It is an anti-incumbent, anti-establishment year. And in California, Democrats are the establishment. So we'll watch this play out. But Javier Becerra's campaign certainly, and other Democrats, did not want to have spending millions of dollars again on Democrat ads and violence, if you will. So now you have a Democrat and a Republican advancing to the fall campaign in California, our most popular state. The other thing I will note is just look at this now. Just in terms of your panel was having this conversation. People are not happy with politics. And in California, there was no clear favorite. Mr. Becerra and Mr. Hilton will move on, but 28%, 25%, 23%. 5%, 3%. Just you had all these candidates running, and the vote was split all over the place. And the two people who will advance essentially getting 28% and 25%. So a number of candidates in the race, voters all over the map, if to borrow a phrase, as you get there. But now, again, in our most populous state, Gavin Newsom, term limited, going out. Mr. Becerra, former congressman, former state attorney general, former member of the Biden cabinet, running against Steve Hilton, former Fox News host, the more conservative candidate. So California has a Democrat-Republican matchup because of the jungle primary, and it could have been Democrat on Democrat, which would have been a lot of money spent. Democrats would rather spend money on the governor's race and have resources elsewhere and not be fighting each other from now until November.
All right. Thank you very much, John King. So, David Axelrod, it is obviously, you could say, Democrats other than Tom Steyer supporters wanted an outcome like this because they think it favors 100%. Them to have a Democrat versus a Republican, so you don't split the vote.
Yes.
So fine. But Steve Hilton has advanced. You had a Republican advance. He is a former Fox News host. He's also a very energetic person who has now been trying to, position himself as a much more of a California Republican.
Yes, and the first thing he did to do that is to dispute the president's interpretation of the count as being a rigged election.
Yep.
That was a declaration of independence. The president was his booster rocket to get into the runoff because there were two Republicans who were relatively even in the competition. Trump came along, he endorsed Hilton. But as I've said before, he puts wind in your sails in a primary, and he's an anchor in the general. He's trying to separate himself from Trump. But let's just say for a second, that was what made the Trump's outburst over the weekend so absurd, because the idea that the election was being rigged to keep Republicans out was insane. And Karen Bass was mourning the loss of Pratt in Los Angeles, and I think Becerra is celebrating the ascension of Hilton because it's a Democratic state. Los Angeles is even more Democratic than the state. They'd love to run against Republicans. Democrat on Democrat is harder.
So, instead, it is interesting, though, as the governor pointed out, and as John King said, this is an anti-establishment, anti-incumbent year. I mean, we'll see. You're talking about California, okay? So I guess I got to just say you're talking about California. But Javier Becerra is as traditional and incumbent and, all of those things as it gets. And Steve Hilton isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that gives an opportunity for someone to kind of play themselves as outsider. But, I was actually thinking about the kind of failures of the left in California specifically. I think that a lot of folks were trying to boost Tom Steyer. He tried to really spend a lot of money in that new media ecosystem, lean into the wealth tax there. Yes. That didn't necessarily pay off. You have, I think in California, a history of that more mainstream Democrat being able to crowd out the progressive left lane, and they haven't still been able to overcome that. But I still don't think that away from what is a general tenor of anti-establishment. And I think that there are some issues that are guiding that. I think that AI kind of rejection or anti-data centers or wanting to share the profits of the future of work comes up all the time. I think that sentiment change about Israel is something that is undeniable in polling and is now a kind of uniting figure among base right and left. And you're seeing that as a disconnect with elected officials. So I feel like when you think about anti-establishment, you have to add in the issues in there too that are sometimes driving the gateway for these candidates.
And it is interesting, as David pointed out, that when you saw in California, Steve Hilton going against Trump and saying, I'm not seeing any evidence that this is rigged. He actually said it 24 hours ago here. Here he is.
We've been very vigilant on it. We're keeping an eye on it. We've got teams standing by, lawyers standing by, and actually it's the same answer that actually I've been giving for a few days now. We've seen nothing that would give us cause to intervene in that way.
Okay, we're in a world where a Republican endorsed by Trump saying, I'm not seeing any evidence of election fraud, everything seems fine, when Trump says they're out to get him, is actually, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
So
survivable in California, maybe not in South Carolina.
Right,
required in California. Required.
Right. Required. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the nature of the different states and the compositions that go with it. But I mean, I don't think it's a bellwether yet, I guess is what I'm saying. To your point, required or needed, but take it to South Carolina or some other states down south, maybe a little different move.
But for Steve Hilton Steve Hilton to agree with the president, to agree with Vance, and to agree with Speaker Johnson that there was widespread fraud happening here in California would diminish what he just accomplished.
Right.
He got to this point, so it would diminish the votes that he got. So why would he? He's got to. Someone's got to call a spade here, right? If it's not fraud because his team's working on it, one, I would hope that he's having a conversation with the president's team and calling him behind the scenes and saying, please stop saying that because you're, cheapening my win. You're cheapening my win, essentially. Yes.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really interesting is Steyer. He's ran as a kind of a self-loathing billionaire, and he spent hundreds of millions of his own dollars flaying billionaires. If he had gone to the general, he might have spent so much money he wouldn't be a billionaire anymore. But it just shows you that you can't take the progressive toolkit, put $200 million behind it, and expect that progressive voters are going to follow you.
All right. Okay, everyone stay here. We are continuing to follow the breaking news as we have made that call in California with advancing for Steve Hilton and Javier Becerra. We made that call. And Iran now retaliating tonight against the U.S. as well. We understand these strikes back and forth, launching missile and drones toward the U.S. The escalation is coming after that Apache went down along the Strait of Hormuz. And a website tied to the Trump family is trying to cash in on the White House cage fight. This is a whole new way that maybe you never would have thought of celebrating America's 250th anniversary. They are selling a $12,000 coin with Trump's face. And we also have new results coming in South Carolina. We'll have those for you right after this. Back with our breaking news, election night in America on this Tuesday. Polls are about to close any moment in Maine here. On the Democratic side, Graham Plattner fighting after a number of controversies, and we're just getting new numbers in as well from South Carolina. The latest total on the Republican side in the race for governor, as you can see, Pamela Evette, who is the current lieutenant governor backed by Trump, is ahead, but a very small percentage of the vote is in, only just a few percentage points in. And so keeping that same caveat in mind, look at the GOP race for Senate, where Lindsey Graham is facing an unexpected challenge. He's never had to go to a runoff. He's far ahead now, but again, only a few percentage points are in. So really can't read much into any of that right now, but important to see these numbers. Everyone's back here with me now. Okay, let's just give you a chance, Governor, first to react to what we're seeing in South Carolina. Obviously, the numbers are, a big lead now, but it's early, and we don't have a lot of votes in.
Yeah, but I think the numbers that you just saw in the governor's race will hold. I think that the Trump endorsement ensured Pamela's spot in the runoff. And then the question was for number two. I think that Allen is sort of the safe bet. and as a consequence will end up in the runoff with her. I think the 2 congressmen are out. And I think the wild card was Ron Ruddy, who had real momentum last week. But I think that's been thwarted. I think it'll be Allen and Everett in the runoff.
In the runoff. All right, and we'll see as those numbers come in. Maura, let's talk about Maine. Graham Plattner, what are you looking for there? I mean, it had been, he had been this sort of all in this anti-establishment. People embraced him. This guy. Then first there was the Nazi tattoo. Now there's a series of controversies with women, extramarital affairs. But what are you looking for tonight to gauge where this goes, right? Because he's not running fully unopposed, even though the person on the ballot running against him is not in the race anymore.
Right, but she did say last week, just as a reminder, she's still on the ballot. She let people know, because of all these stories and all these shoes that dropped about Graham Plattner, she let some people know, I'm still on the ballot. And you're seeing, your reporter who was in the field earlier showed us that there were people who were voting for her because they didn't want to vote for Graham Plattner, knowing that maybe as it gets farther ahead and goes to the general, Graham Plattner is going to win, at least to get through to the general. But they didn't want to have themselves voting for someone like that. And I think that there's a concern when it comes to wanting to put forward someone. Chuck Schumer put his, kind of backing behind Janet Mills early on. That got rebuffed, and then you have Graham Plattner. Was there vetting done for this? I mean, how many more shoes are going to drop? And so do you have to support him? As a Democrat, what does that do to you as a member of Congress? Are you going to throw your support? What is it doing to Ro Khanna in California, who has gone out there and campaigned for him? I think there is a concern. If you're not fully vetting these candidates, what does it say about you? Does it show a bit of hypocrisy? And what I'm looking for is how many people in Maine show up tonight and say, you know what, I don't like Graham Plattner, I'm voting for Janet Mills.
And the Democrats know they need that Senate seat to turn the Senate.
Oh, it's absolutely pivotal. I think we started the year, and the assumption was that North Carolina and Maine were the 2 seats that Democrats would likely pick up. And what other seats could they pick up?
Yep.
Now, they may pick up...
They need 4.
They may pick up more seats. They're certainly in a better position to pick up other seats than would have been suspected earlier in the year. When you look at Ohio and Alaska and Iowa and Texas, but Maine was going to be one of the pillars of this. So there is a lot of anxiety about this race.
And you know what, instead, when I said extramarital affairs, it was sexting. And I
Right.
think the fact that I said one, and there's a lot of storm clouds around Graham Plattner.
100%.
Right? People can't even keep track right now of what's happening, what might come next. And that's the storm clouds.
Yeah, and it's been growing as he's been in this race. But, for as controversial as this race has been, I think for maybe folks nationally, the Democratic Party, Washington, D.C., it hasn't been that controversial in Maine, seemingly. Like, since the second he's gotten in that race, he has dominated. And he's raised money. We have not seen Janet Mills being able to break through. And so I think we have to wrestle the reality of the scandal with the fact that we don't see a Democratic electorate right now penalizing him for that. Maybe that starts tonight, but I think the buy should be high.
We'll see. All right, everyone stay with us. And next, the Trump family hoping to profit from Trump's cage fight at the White House with a $12,000 coin with Trump's face on it. As we watch the election results coming in, we'll bring you new numbers as we get them. And also this hour, a $12,000 coin with Trump's face on it. That's what a website tied to the president's family is selling ahead of the UFC brawl at the White House this weekend that Trump is hosting for his own birthday and America's 250th. The website, Trump Coins, which says its coins are designed by Trump, is partnering with the UFC to sell the collection of themed coins, which come alongside, complete with the president's face and his signature. There is a cheaper silver coin option that you can get for $250. The coins are billed as a celebration of America's 250th anniversary, and construction of the UFC cage for the fight is continuing on the White House lawn today, as you can see. Thanks so much for joining us. Our continuing coverage of Election Night in America continues now with Anderson Cooper.
It is primary night in America once again, with serious implications for November and beyond. Voters in Nevada, North Dakota, South Carolina, and Maine casting ballots today. Polls now closed in the last 2. South Carolina an hour ago, just now Maine. In South Carolina, crowded field of Republicans is competing to succeed the state's outgoing governor. The race, you'll recall, includes the Trump-backed lieutenant governor and, most notably, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who broke with the president over the Epstein files. And Republican Senator Lindsey Graham is facing several primary challengers. He's out to a comfortable lead, but with few precincts reporting. In the Democratic race to challenge him, pediatrician Annie Andrews was leading in polls going into tonight, maintains that lead right now. The one race drawing more attention than most, if not all the others tonight, is in Maine. Oyster farmer Graham Plattner running to challenge longtime incumbent Republican Susan Collins this fall. He's all but unopposed tonight. Maine's Governor Janet Mills suspended her campaign last month, but she remains on the ballot. Interesting to see tonight how many votes she may draw in light of the scandal surrounding Plattner over extramarital sexting, allegations of mistreatment by ex-girlfriends, a Nazi tattoo. As you might imagine, Republicans have seized upon all three of those things, and Democrats hoping to retake the Senate are split over whether to shun or embrace him, if only at a distance.
I don't think Democrats win by accepting a degraded state of affairs. I think we win by elevating and governing from a redefined and more decent center. Actually, I've been clear and candid since October of 2025 where I stand. My focus is on supporting those candidates throughout the country whose character, whose platform I think elevates and advances the Democratic Party and helps us win back the Senate.
If that choice on the ballot is between that and a senator who's voted to take health care away from millions of Americans, that's the situation that we have to weigh. I don't think that it's to hand wave away any of this. I think it's, again, for voters. And frankly, I don't think the people of Maine are particularly concerned about what people in Washington are fretting about.
Well, let's start with tonight with CNN's Arlette Saenz in Maine, and also CNN's Diane Gallagher is in South Carolina for us. We'll start with Arlette at Plattner headquarters. What is the mood among the supporters there tonight?
Well, Anderson, attendees have started to file into this gymnasium in the very town where Graham Plattner was born. They're hoping to hear a victory speech from their favored candidate this evening. Plattner is favored to win this Democratic primary, but the question is by how much, and whether that might be a sign of the enthusiasm that is around Plattner in the wake of these scandals that have confronted his campaign in recent weeks. Now, we spent the day speaking with Maine voters, and they really had mixed views about Plattner's controversy and his viability as a candidate going forward. Here are two Maine voters we spoke with today.
I don't believe in misogyny or power over women. And although he has said all of those things were in the past, I don't know if a person can change that much.
I know he's got a lot of bad stuff behind him. I also understand that having gone through 4 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, he has more than PTSD, he had a moral injury, and it really messes with your mind.
Now, the biggest test for Plattner will come in November when he's expected to face off against Republican Senator Susan Collins. Republicans have made clear that they want to put Plattner's controversies front and center in their campaign messaging against Plattner. Earlier today, Collins, speaking with our colleague Manu Raju, said that she thinks that some of these allegations that he's faced are unacceptable, that he needs to explain himself to Maine voters. But this is a state that's also going to be critical for both parties when it comes to control of the Senate after the midterm elections. Some national Democrats are anxious that these controversies could continue to plague Plattner heading into November, potentially putting their plans to flip this seat blue at risk. Anderson.
Arlette, thanks very much. We're going to talk to John King at the Magic Wall shortly, look at numbers coming in from Maine. But first, let's go to South Carolina, where polls closed just over an hour ago. Diane Gallagher is there following the key races. What are people saying about the gubernatorial and the Senate races tonight?
Yeah, that gubernatorial race, Anderson, all that anybody is focusing on right now on the GOP side. A lot of eyes, especially some of those potentially in the White House, on whether or not Lieutenant Governor Pamela Abbott is going to get a Trump bump after the president endorsed her a little less than 2 weeks ago. I will tell you that this is a stacked field with 5 candidates who all come with their own very respectable resumes. The lieutenant governor, of course, the longtime attorney general Alan Wilson, 2 sitting members of Congress, and Nancy Mace and Ralph Norman and businessman Ram Reddy. And there has been no clear leader in this race thus far. And in talking to voters today, we kind of got a mix of that support, speaking with them. And in fact, many of them who say they're big fans of the president didn't even know that he'd officially endorsed in this race. And those who did know it said that it didn't really impact their vote, saying they'd already done the research, they knew the candidate they wanted to vote for, and that potentially if Pamela Abbott advanced to a runoff, because in South Carolina, a candidate must get 50% or the top 2 vote getters advance to a runoff. That's likely what's going to happen in this particular race. They said then they may give her a second look because of that Trump endorsement, but she's got to make the runoff first. Now, you mentioned the Senate race as well. Lindsey Graham, who has been in the U.S. Senate from here in South Carolina since 2003, has 5 opponents in the GOP primary. We spoke with a lot of people who said they cast ballots for various numbers of those opponents. Didn't really say why, except they didn't want to vote for Lindsey Graham. When we spoke to other people, they said they voted for Graham because he's been in for a long time or was endorsed by the president. But we'll have to wait and see if that will matter and if he potentially could be forced to a runoff as well.
All right, Diane Gallagher, thanks very much. John King is tracking the numbers at the Magic Wall. John, what does it look like?
Anderson, as Diane was just going through, number one, you're the Lieutenant Governor of the state. Number two, you have Donald Trump's endorsement with 21% of the vote in. You're at 28%. If you don't get 50 plus 1, then you have a runoff in 2 weeks. Interesting at the moment, for all the talk of anti-establishment sentiment in the country, and trust me from my travels, there's a lot of it, South Carolina does tend to be a more establishment state, especially on the Republican side. You've got the sitting Lieutenant Governor and the sitting Attorney General right now at the top of the race. Ram Reddy is a businessman who is trying to test that anti-politics, anti-establishment sentiment. He's running third at the moment, and then as you come down here, 2 members of Congress, Anderson. If nothing else, South Carolina is guaranteed a turnover in its congressional delegation because Ralph Norman and Nancy Mace decided to run for governor. Nancy Mace, as you well know, she actually worked for Trump back in 2016 for a bit, the 2016 campaign, but she and Trump are at loggerheads over a number of issues, including her push to get the Epstein files released. She's at the bottom of the pack right now. Ralph Norman at 17% right there. So the lieutenant governor on top there, Anderson, again, you got to get to, it's 22%. Your eyes tell you right now we're likely to head for a runoff here, but we'll continue to count the votes. And, does the Trump, there's been conversations since Randy Feenstra in Iowa didn't win the gubernatorial nomination. Spencer Pratt out in the LA mayor's race didn't win, and Trump had endorsed him. So there's questions. I would not overplay that angle in South Carolina, but let's watch how the day plays out.
And, John, in terms of main numbers, are we still waiting on those?
Let's go. We did see some on the Republican side, but Susan Collins is unopposed, so that's not a surprise at all. You see there a runaway there. So let's take a look at the Senate, the Democratic primary. We still have nothing coming in, Anderson. I'm just going to pull up the map a little bit. This is where we're going to look most. The southeast part of the state, right along the coast, half of the population in the state of Maine lives in that circle I just drew. And guess what? That's also the blue, very, very blue 1st Congressional District. So if Democrats want to cast a protest vote either for Governor Mills or David Costello, an active candidate, Governor Mills suspended her campaign, but she has several times in the past couple of weeks, amid all the Plattner controversy, said, I'm still on the ballot. So let's just watch how this plays out. And again, I wouldn't overstate that either. I talked to a couple of the voters we spoke to when I was up in Maine doing a piece on this race, a couple who said they were going to vote for Mills or had voted for Mills, voted early in the primary. A couple of them said they would still vote for Plattner, at least as of today, come November, but they did want to lodge a protest vote there. And I did talk to one of our voters who said that she is now a never Plattner and is likely to support Collins, but she's going to weigh whether to support Collins or sit out. So let's see when the numbers come in, how much of a protest vote is registered, and try to figure out what to make of it.
All right, John, we'll check in with you. Joining me right now is former Michigan Republican Congressman Peter Meijer, former Trump White House Communications Director Alyssa Farr Griffin, former Special Advisor to President Obama, Van Jones, and Executive Committee Chair of the New York State Democratic Committee, Christine Quinn. Alyssa, what are you watching for tonight?
I will be looking at Maine tonight. Obviously, the Graham-Plattner scandals just keep coming. Just this week, there were new allegations from an ex-girlfriend, someone I've actually known for over a decade, against him, somebody I consider to be very credible in those allegations. And they're just more and more stacking up. You've got the Nazi tattoo. You have him denigrating wounded soldiers. You have allegations from ex-girlfriends. You've got the sexting. That's going to start to resonate with people. And it would be one thing if he was running against, let's say, Ken Paxton. But he's not. He's running against Susan Collins, one of the most bipartisan senators in the Senate, somebody who's also a political heavyweight. She's used to running really tough races. So if you're a woman, a Democrat in that state, and you're weighing how serious should I take these allegations, you're really not happy with the direction things are going. In Susan Collins, you have someone who's going to be campaigning as, I voted for Obama's Supreme Court justices. I'm willing to break with Trump when I need to. And I think you could really see a very serious race in a state that I think Democrats thought was going to be much easier to win.
Congressman Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, she voted to impeach Trump in 2021. The question that I want to see, or the data that I think will be really interesting, Janet Mills has not been running a campaign. She withdrew herself, but she's still on the ballot. How many votes does she pick up? How many protest votes on the Democratic side who say, you know what, I know Graham Plattner, he's really the only viable candidate in this race. He's the only guy still running. I can't stomach it. I'm circling in Janet Mills. And who do they vote for come November?
How do you see it, Vin?
Look, Plattner is a flawed candidate. He's not running against Susan Collins. He's running against Donald Trump. That's how Democrats are going to see this. And it's really hard for us to hear all this passion from Republicans suddenly about moral standing and being a good person and being kind to puppies. Look at your president. What are you literally talking about? And so I think if you're a Democrat or an independent who's tired of this president running the country into the ground, starting dumb wars he can't win, running up the price of everything, you've got one shot in Maine to send a message not to Graham Plattner, not to Susan Collins, but to this White House is out of control. And I think that's going to be all this stuff is great for cable news. I think on the ground in Maine, it's going to be a fight about the future of the country, not about Graham Plattner's past.
Christine?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I think, is he a flawed candidate? You can't argue he's not. I mean, it's just a fact. But the fact that he is doing as well as he is, even as flawed as he is, speaks not to him or Susan Collins. It speaks to how in the toilet President Trump's numbers are in the state of Maine and how hard it is for everyday people in Maine to survive, to pay for gas, to pay for food. And then you have a president who says he doesn't think at all about the economic impact of the war on everyday Americans. So if there's a choice between a guy who's done some bad things or a guy who says you don't matter at all when it costs now $70 to fill up your pickup truck,
Are you concerned at all about, this is a race right now among Democrats that there's no even kind of GOP opposition research going on. Are you concerned about what might come out down the road?
Yeah, they're going to back up a dump truck and it's going to be all kind of dog poop dumped on this dude. And I don't think a lot of voters are going to care because we've just been so eroded and corroded in what we accept now because of what you see from the White House every day.
I wonder, though, Van, the Democrats love to run on the moral high ground, and I actually think you do in many ways have it in this moment, but when you nominate somebody like a Graham Plattner, it makes it much harder to say this is a critique of the character in the White House. This is a critique of abusing women from, the senior-most figures in the Trump administration. It's a lot harder to do that when this is the nominee.
We're going to continue following the returns as they come in throughout the hour. Next, after an American attack helicopter went down, its crew was rescued. The U.S. retaliates, and Iran says it then retaliated. That is, the president yet again signed a peace deal, signals that a peace deal is days away. Later, you know about the UFC fight scheduled on the South Lawn of the White House, but did you know that the Trump family is now profiting off it? Don Jr. and Eric Trump's connection to gold and silver coins being sold to commemorate the fight. Striking counterstrike tonight in the Persian Gulf. Iran saying it launched missiles and drones against American targets after U.S. strikes on southern Iran. No word yet what, if anything, the Iranian salvo may have hit. All of it following the downing of a U.S. Army Apache helicopter overnight by an Iranian drone. Both crew members survived. The president initially shrugged it off before posting this today. Quote, nevertheless, the United States must of necessity respond to this attack. CENTCOM announced it retaliated just after 5 p.m. Eastern, calling the mission a, quote, proportional response to unjustified Iranian aggression. Two sources tell CNN that initial U.S. strikes targeted military sites around the Strait of Hormuz, one saying additional strikes are expected. The president telling ABC News they should, quote, be very strong, very powerful, and that's what this one is. Speaking with the Wall Street Journal, though, he said the chopper downing, quote, wasn't a big deal, and just last night he was talking like peace was truly at hand.
And we're in the final throes of what will be a very, very good deal that will not allow in any way, shape, or form nuclear weapons, etc. And the strait will open up right away. It'll open up immediately upon signing, which could be in 2 or 3 days.
If, in fact, that is the case, the president revealed no evidence of it. True or not, though, he has now been saying words to that effect for months.
We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. They want to make a deal, and we are very willing to make a deal.
Well, I think we're going to end it. I can't tell you for sure. Boy, they want to make a deal so badly. You have no idea how badly they want to make a deal.
I do see a deal in Iran, yeah. We were very close to a deal, and it's looking very good that we're going to make a deal with Iran.
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over.
We think we're close to a deal, and that's okay.
Joining us now, Axios' Brock Ravid and retired Army Lieutenant General Karen Gibson. Brock, what are you hearing about the U.S. response at this point?
What I heard, Anderson, that so far the U.S. launched 3 waves of strikes against air defense and radar systems in several sites in southern Iran, close to the Strait of Hormuz. All the targets are around the Strait of Hormuz. And at least at the moment, as of a minute ago, the Iranians still haven't launched any retaliation. And I think what the U.S. is waiting to see, what the U.S. military is waiting to see, is whether there is going to be any Iranian retaliation. They think there's going to be. So I think that they're also preparing in defense to try and intercept any Iranian attack when it's launched.
General Gibson, as we mentioned, a source told CNN that this Apache helicopter was brought down by a Shahed drone. What kind of targets are Shahed drones typically used for, and how does the U.S. establish whether this was intentional downing of the aircraft?
Yeah, so I think they're used against a broad range of targets. Fixed sites, mobile things, in this case, like aircraft or perhaps a vessel. They can be used across a broad range of targets. Determining or attributing that it was a Shahed drone is probably not that difficult. It was probably picked up on radar, not only by aircraft in the area, but shipboard radar for various ships that are sailing in the area. And, the pilot's radio transmissions also probably would have given some indication of that. So attributing it as coming from Iran, or even where it came from in Iran, may not be that difficult. Attributing the intentionality, whether it was an accident, whether the Iranians thought it was an Israeli aircraft, that's a lot tougher, and it would probably require some kind of incidental collection of communications where that was conveyed. And we may not have information on the intentionality of it, but nailing it down as the type of drone and where it came from, it sounds like there was a wealth of sensors that probably provided that information.
Barak, you had said, I think, that the U.S. was waiting to see if Iran responded. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they said in a social media post that Iran had launched missiles and drones toward U.S. targets in the region. Is that not the case?
As far as I know from U.S. officials, the Iranians haven't launched any retaliatory strikes yet. I'm not sure, and at least I haven't seen any statement by the Iranians that they have.
And Barak, what are you hearing about? I mean, the president has talked about a deal being closed for many, many months now. What is the latest you are hearing on that?
So I think it was, let's go back something like 10 days when the Iranians send back their response to the U.S., and President Trump holds a meeting in the Situation Room to decide whether he wants to take it or not. At the end of that meeting, he decides to ask for 2 amendments. Those 2 amendments are then sent to the Iranians, who take something like 5 or 6 days before they tell the U.S. through the mediators that they think they will have a response in 24 to 48 hours. That was on Saturday night, Sunday morning. Then the escalation between Iran and the U.S., Iran and Israel happened, and I think everything got held up. So the U.S. is still waiting to hear back from the Iranians about the 2 amendments that President Trump asked for. what I hear from sources that are involved in the mediation efforts is that the kind of things that are still open are, for example, I'll give you an example to understand how far down the road this is. For example, President Trump wants to put a 60-day deadline on the process of downblending of the Iranian uranium. The Iranians say we want 90 days. That's one of the things that they're still haggling over. If it's 60 days or 90 days, that's not a big gap. But until you don't close all those small gaps, you just don't have a deal.
General, in terms of a U.S. response, how is a response calibrated to limit? I mean, how do you play this kind of tit-for-tat game of retaliation? It's not a game, but I mean, retaliation, especially if you want there to be a deal.
Yeah, no, that's a very important decision. I think it was important also to strike back, one, to reestablish deterrence, two, to show that this kind of action cannot go unanswered, and three, if we fail to act, to an extent we legitimize Iran's claims that they control these international waters, which by international maritime law are supposed to be available for unimpeded transit. So it's important to strike back to establish deterrence, but as you say, without launching both parties on a kind of escalatory tit-for-tat cycle. And so striking probably things, as we've heard, perhaps drone command and control sites, radars associated with drones, specific military equipment in the Strait of Hormuz that could be used for these kind of airstrikes, ideally even the specific equipment that was used to strike the Apache, as well as perhaps, drone logistical sites, but not striking further into Iran, not hitting dual use kind of facilities, not hitting civilian things. Because, as you say, we want to send a message and reestablish deterrence without escalation and to leave room for these glacial talks to continue.
Yeah, General Gibson, Barak Ravid, thanks very much. I appreciate it. Coming up next, the president says the UFC cage match on the South Lawn of the White House is to celebrate America's 250th birthday. Then why is the Trump family promoting these Trump coins commemorating the UFC fight, with the most expensive one costing nearly $12,000? Details on that. Later, we'll check back in on primary results coming in, especially in the Maine Senate race, which could decide control of the Senate in November. Today, June 9th, is not only primary day across a number of states where Americans get to exercise their sacred right to vote, it is also the day that the Trump family officially starts to cash in on the UFC cage match planned at the White House. That cashing is in the form of these Trump coins, which went on sale today, described as, quote, the official gold and silver of UFC 250. The priciest of these coins will run you $11,999.99. That is the cost of the fine gold We the People medallion, it's called. The Trump coin site touts that, quote, this extraordinary collectible unites American history, presidential legacy, and combat sports history in one landmark release. Note that it comes in a case featuring photos of President Trump and UFC President Dana White on either side of Donald Trump's signature. Now, there are 4 medallions in all, 2 gold, 2 silver, ranging in size and price, with the lowest costing around $250. The site says they are all designed by President Trump himself, which is amazing. Where does he find the time? This is, of course, not the first product the president or his family members are pushing.
I'm proud to be partnering with my very good friend Lee Greenwood, who doesn't love his song, God Bless the USA, in connection with promoting the God Bless the USA Bible. This Bible is the King James Version and also includes our Founding Father documents, yes, the Constitution, which I'm fighting for every single day, very hard.
The presidential edition, quote, commemorating the 45th and 47th president, costs $99.99, as does the Melania Trump First Lady edition in red. Then there's Trump sneakers. Candidate Trump unveiled these Never Surrender high tops, which at the time retail for $399. And yes, they were released before he was reelected. But lest you think he's forgotten, 3 weeks into the war with Iran, President Trump posted this to social media, claiming that these same high tops were now selling at a sneaker convention in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for $180,000. That presidential post about sneaker prices during the war. Where does he find the time? I'd be remiss not to mention the Trump phone. The $499 gold-plated phones finally started shipping a few weeks ago, nearly a year after initially taking customers' money. While originally touted as being made in the USA, they are now marketed as designed with American values in mind. Which we should just pause and reflect on that claim for a moment. It's designed with American values in mind. I don't know what that means. Someone was thinking about America when they signed the contract to hawk these? Experts say they closely resemble a phone made in China, but somehow American values were thought about when they were designed. Rest easy. Then, of course, there's the Trump meme coin, which he launched in a social media post 3 days before inauguration. It's one of 4 Trump family crypto projects. A recent Reuters analysis found the Trump family have used these projects to generate at least $2.3 billion, which is great for them, not so great for more than 1 million investors who have net losses totaling $2.3 billion. Back with our political panel. I know you're waiting for your coins. It's been the office has been a buzz, and with this desk, by the way, was also made with
America in mind.
Yes. But does any of this matter? I mean, you would nothing sticks.
Nothing
it's all
sticks
built
with Trump. I mean, it's Teflon Don. I just think of the things that we Republicans were outraged with Hunter Biden when Biden was in office. He's profiteering off of this, his artistry and these pictures he was drawing. This is next level. Right. It's really next level. But while it doesn't really stick with Donald Trump, it does potentially stick with Republicans down ballot. Heading into the midterms, when the gas prices are high, when the cost of everything seems through the roof, having to defend these sort of things and things like, $1 billion ballroom gets increasingly harder for Republicans.
Also, to me, what was surprising about the coins, I don't know why it should be surprising, but, this whole UFC cage match thing, whatever you think of it, was sort of marketed as a celebration of Flag Day, and, of course, it's on the president's birthday. It's now the part of the 250th celebrations, and they are making money off the 250th celebration.
There's going to be merch, right? There's going to be merch. I have a Home Depot Homer bucket that has America's 250 on it, so I'm also participating in this great Homer buckets. They're $4.98, I think. But to Alyssa's point, it is what the political image is going to be of this. They're selling for 2.5 times the spot value on like silver or gold. They're a nice little turducken between Trump and the UFC and the 250th.
I like a turducken reference. Yeah. Some people are going to need to scramble to look it up, but it's like a duck and a chicken and inside a turkey.
Yes, exactly. But it's all great things, right? But these are places where the proceeds should go to a patriotic charity.
Right, yes, exactly.
You don't want to give the impression. Yes. Obviously, there's a lot of profiting, in any merchandising scenario, but this is something that's just so on the nose. Find a good charity, support them.
Right. If the national parks were profiting from this,
Or the VA,
yes.
which the president has cut services at dramatically. If the money was maybe going there, we would feel a little better about it. But once you hawk the Bible with a constitutional insert, the sky's the limit. Really, that is so low. This barely.
I would be afraid I'd get struck by lightning if I did that. I just
God
wouldn't do that.
The Trump sneakers did lead to a fantastic SNL skit with Shane Gillis, so we shouldn't forget that.
But one thing because there is some seriousness in all of this. There's reporting by the Washington Post, by the way, that this UFC fight, which is taking place, it's the president's birthday, it's the 250th celebration of America, but that it's not going to have White House press pool coverage. That actually the credentialing for press is going through the UFC, which is extremely odd. It's extremely unusual. I worked in the White House. You always have a press pool cover any event that the president's present for. That's just another step in this direction of cracking down on press access and not getting, the information to the American people of what their tax dollars are actually paying for at this big display of America.
This is so tacky.
Yeah.
It's just tacky, and it's like kindergarten during COVID, no class. You know what I mean? Like no class. And I just think that a lot of people who voted for this guy, they really believed he's going to do something for them. They really believed it. I argue with these folks. They say, no, he's going to do something for us, and he's done nothing. He's run up the price of everything.
He's run over our values, and now he's running off to the bank with all his golden coins, laughing, and all of his proceeds come at the expense of Americans who believed in him. It's just sad.
We're going to take a quick break. Next, back to the primaries and the first results from Maine. We'll be right back. Primary night in America. We're just getting our first results from Maine. I want to go back to John King and the Magic Wall. John?
Very, very, very early results, Anderson. As we look at Maine, the big question in the Democratic primary, it's not who's going to win. I think it's pretty well expected that Graham Plattner, the oyster farmer, the ex-Marine, is going to win this primary. The big question, because of all the recent controversies about Graham Plattner, his character and his temperament, some of his behavior toward women, is how big will the protest vote be? We have no idea at the moment. We have just a tiny percentage. If you look at the map here, just a few small townships in. Again, about half of Maine's population lives inside that line, south of that line, right along the coast, from the Massachusetts border up to about an hour north of Portland. That's the 1st congressional district. That's where most of the population lives. That's where most of the Democrats live in the state of Maine. So we really need to wait to see what's happening here. At the moment, again, 163, 52, 46, a tiny, tiny, tiny number of votes. Plattner at 66, the governor at 20%, David Costello at 14%. He is still an active candidate. She suspended her campaign. Anderson, I don't want to make anything of the numbers right now, but I'll just say this for the dynamic. At the end of the night, people are going to see where Plattner is, and they're going to add this up, right? How big is the non-Plattner vote? And then there will be a debate. You know, does that mean he's weakened? Does that mean there are people out there who can't vote for him? Some of these people are people loyal to their governor who voted for her in the primary, who will vote for Plattner in the fall. Some of them are voting for Mills because they either won't vote for Plattner or they just can't get there yet. So this number at the end of the night is the most important number, I think. What percentage of people did not vote for the clear frontrunner in their race? And then the debate will begin over just what that means.
All right, John King, thanks very much. Back now with the panel. Joining us as well as Alex Seitz-Wald, deputy editor of the Maine paper, the Midcoast Villager. Alex, what are you looking for tonight in the numbers?
Yeah, Anderson. Well, I think John's analysis is exactly correct. Everyone's going to be watching that margin with a threshold around 70, 75% for what would be considered a good night for him. Above that it would be good. Below that, Democrats start to get nervous. That's where he's been at in the polls. I'm also going to be looking at how he performs in different towns. Maine is very diverse geographically. Does he do well in these kind of old mill towns with a lot of working class white voters who shifted from Obama to Trump, towns like Jay or Sanford? How does he do in the coast with older, educated women who have been key voters for Susan Collins in the past? And I'm also going to be looking at the governor's race as a sign of the Senate race. Troy Jackson, Graham Plattner ally, had been polling pretty low throughout the entire course of the race until just a few weeks ago when Plattner really threw all his weight behind him. So if Plattner can help get Troy Jackson over the line or within striking distance of winning, I think that would also help bolster Graham Plattner's case that he's in a strong position in November.
How do you see the way Plattner has responded to these negative stories? How have you seen it evolve over the course of this race?
Yeah, it's a great question, Anderson, because early on in those scandals in the fall, the Reddit post, the tattoo, people really liked the way he responded. They felt like he took ownership, he took responsibility, something you don't often hear from politicians. But then I heard in this more recent, the sexting issue with his early in his marriage, he was defensive. He criticized the media's coverage. He took issue with the number of women he had been sexting with, and that turned off voters that I've spoken to almost as much as the allegations themselves. I think he's corrected a little bit, and he's kind of staunched the bleeding, but Susan Collins' support has been quiet. People have referred to it as the silent Susan phenomenon. So it's harder to get a read on where those voters who have split their tickets in the past and crossed party lines, those are the ones who are really going to matter in November. And these kinds of issues are going to make it harder for them to support Plattner, I think.
Alyssa, how much do you think Plattner's percentage of the vote, I mean, it matters to folks who look at the numbers a lot. How much do you think it matters moving forward?
I think John King nailed it. If he gets upwards of 75%, I think there's a good argument for him staying in the race. But if you see this real peel off, even with Janet Mills not formally in the race anymore, that's a protest vote. And Susan Collins is somebody who has the ability to pull off moderate Democrats and independents. You guys are absolutely right. There's tremendous frustration with Donald Trump, but she's going to have the next 6 months until Election Day to run as far from Donald Trump as humanly possible. And Susan Collins is capable of doing that and will. She's pro-choice. She is moderate. She is centrist. She has a 30-year-long record that she can point to in the state of Maine. And I'm just telling you that this guy is looking tougher and tougher to defend every day.
Susan Collins is bipartisan when it don't matter. That's standard in American life for 200 years. You don't get a cookie for voting for
Donald Trump. It never is the deciding vote. When it was always came down to her and Murkowski, they would never go the distance when you needed her to be the one who put it over.
Voted for Obama.
They're always
voted for impeachment.
Is there a line that Graham Plattner could cross that would be too far?
Well, yeah. Sure. Look, if some criminal stuff comes out, I mean, listen. But what I'm saying is, right now, you've got somebody. He's got a checkered past. I like accountability.
And checkered president, too.
I like accountability, but I'm a second chance, third chance, fourth chance guy. I spent a lot of my life working with people in prison. What I didn't like about Graham Plattner recently was when he stopped being an accountable guy and started being the blame other people guy. I don't like that. I think that's bad. But is it bad enough for me to say, please, Susan Collins, go back in there and support Donald Trump on everything that matters? No.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Alex Seitz-Walt, thanks very much. Everyone else, stick around. Next, California, and a long-awaited projection in the governor's race there. This primary night in America, we've got a new projection from the last primary night a full week ago. Late today, CNN made a projection of California's race for governor. After 7 days of vote counting, we can finally say which two candidates will face off in November. CNN's John King is back at the wall with that. John?
And Anderson, as you know, we were here last week counting these votes, and because California, every voter gets a ballot by mail, and they can cast that ballot, and as long as they're come in, as long as they're postmarked by Election Day, they count them. But you're right, 91% of the estimated ballots count now, which made our decision desk comfortable in making this projection. The Democrat, Javier Becerra, will run against Republican Steve Hilton in the November election. Mr. Becerra at about 28% right now, Steve Hilton at 25%, if you round that up a little bit. The disappointment is in the Tom Steyer campaign. They're in third place at 23%, if you round that up, so not terribly far back, but our decision desk now confident with the outstanding votes that Mr. Becerra and Mr. Hilton will face off in the fall. This, unless you're a Steyer supporter, Anderson, has caused a big sigh of relief among Democrats, both nationally and in California, because now you will have, it's by no means guaranteed. There's a lot of anti-establishment in Washington, in the House races, in the Senate races. We focus on voters angry at Washington, voters angry at President Trump. But voters everywhere are in a volatile mood, and Becerra is not the incumbent governor, but California Democrats have run the state for some time. So this is by no means a cakewalk, but by voter registration, it's an overwhelmingly Democratic state. And so Becerra versus a Republican is a lot easier for Democrats to swallow than Becerra versus Steyer, which would have been Democrat on Democrat fighting. Not only did they not want that to happen in California, they thought if you had two Democrats spending millions of dollars fighting each other over different issues, different positions, character issues or whatever in California, some of that could reverberate into other Democratic races across the country. So in our largest state and our most populous state, Becerra versus Hilton heading into the fall. And again, if you're not in the Steyer campaign, most Democrats are happy that they get a D versus an R.
And just, let's go back to Maine. Any numbers?
We're waiting for more. Let's check and see if we can get here a little bit quicker. Whoops, I went way down here. Let me come back up. Sorry, Anderson, we got a lot of races in the wall here. We got to come back to Senate D. There we go. Not much, nothing since we last spoke. Graham Plattner at the moment, I think a couple more towns come in. Graham Plattner at the moment, 71%, but at 1,100 votes. So we have a long way to go. Still nothing. The most populous area, you just had the main guest on, knows this better than I do. But right down here, half the population lives inside that, actually even south of where I drew the line a little bit north. But again, 71% from Plattner at the moment, 18% or 19%, so 29%, or 29% if you add up the quote-unquote non-Plattner vote right now. But Anderson, we're only at 1%, so we'd be putting the cart way out ahead of the horse to even try to explain what that means, because we got a lot of votes to count.
Can we look at the Lindsey Graham race in South Carolina?
We sure can. We can pull back out. Let me make the line go away. Let's come to Senate Republican, and let's check on in. So we're at half the vote. Again, the challenge for Lindsey Graham is stay above 50. Avoid a runoff. Any North Carolina candidate tonight, there's a governor's race, some other races. If you're not above 50, you have a runoff in 2 weeks. I would say this, as an incumbent Republican senator who has the endorsement of the President of the United States and who has spent millions of dollars in the last few weeks on his campaign, it's not a good sign right now that you're at 27%, but CNN can now project, I'm told, that Lindsey Graham will advance to November without a runoff, which meaning he's staying above. He's at 59% right now. We have about half the vote counted, so your eyes were telling you that's where we're headed anyway. So Lindsey Graham will breathe a big sigh of relief tonight, Anderson, that he does not have to campaign for 2 more weeks, that he does not have to ask Donald Trump to step in and help him in a runoff campaign. South Carolina is about as red as you can get. So Lindsey Graham will be the overwhelming favorite in November, even though we talk about this is a Democratic year or a good year for Democrats nationally. I would have a big asterisk when it comes to South Carolina. So Lindsey Graham breathed a big sigh of relief tonight. I will, again, just say this, though, that any challenger against a Republican incumbent gets 27% of the vote, somewhere in that ballpark. We'll see where it ends up. It's a bit of a warning sign to Lindsey Graham that some conservatives back home are not happy.
Yeah. John King, thanks very much. Back now with our political panel. Vin, just in terms of the race in California, obviously the president has been talking about rigged elections. Do you think that is a preview? I mean, is he workshopping stuff for the midterms?
Well, I mean,
for the actual election?
Well, he only says that elections are rigged on days that end in Y, so he's going to continue to do that. I do feel a little bit sorry for Tom Steyer. He's a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time, spent a lot of money. I wonder if, rather than running so far to the left, if he had said, look, I'm a business guy and I'm going to make California work better and lean into his business credentials rather than almost running away from it. But I'm very, very glad Becerra is going to beat the pants off of this guy. And I hope that Democrats, fix the state, because we're going to have three branches of control and the state's not working right. But a Trump-supporting person, a Trump-backed candidate in California has no shot.
Yeah. Well, and of course, Steve Hilton is now already kind of running away from these myths, these lies that the election was stolen. Obviously, Spencer Pratt lost in Los Angeles, so that fueled a bunch of conspiracy theories. But Hilton advanced to the runoff, and now he's distanced himself on Aaron Burnett's show. He knows that he needs to spend now until Election Day separating himself from the president.
I want him to do as well as humanly possible. It's a Republican in California. And the challenge, yes, there are logical reasons to say it's moving by this much. We're a week from this election, and they're still trying to figure out who's going to make these runoffs. But by God, it should not be this hard.
I agree with that.
Florida had issues in 2000. They fixed it, and now they're a hallmark of efficiency.
100%.
California, get your act together.
Amen. No, can't argue with you there. It's not stolen. It's just
It just looks crazy.
It's just slow.
Crazy.
Slow as Christmas. Slow.
Well, that's it for us. Thanks, everyone, for watching. CNN's coverage of Primary Night in America continues. I'll see you tomorrow. The Source with Kaitlan Collins starts now.
And we do begin with breaking news as we come on the air tonight, and results are coming in from Maine in a race that could end up deciding control of the Senate here in Washington. Right now, Graham Plattner, who is the controversy-plagued oyster farmer and Marine veteran, is leading in that race. It's still too early as we come on the air right now to make any projections. Obviously, we'll be tracking that closely throughout this hour. And it comes as the state's governor, Janet Mills, suspended her campaign back in April, but she kept her name on the ballot against Graham Plattner. Now, the number of votes that she gets could be an indication of just how uncomfortable voters are with the controversies that have surrounded Plattner's candidacy. The winner of tonight's primary will take on the Republican senator in this race, Susan Collins, and Democrats are hoping that this will be the year they can succeed in flipping that seat in a state that Donald Trump has lost 3 times. We're also tracking races this hour in South Carolina, North Dakota, and Nevada. It is a busy election night here in America. That means we start with John King, who is at the Magic Wall, where he always is on these election nights. And John, what's your read on the numbers that we're getting in Maine so far tonight?
My read at the moment is have a cup of coffee, check back, and let's let them count. Kaitlan, we're at about 1%. You see, I'll just move Maine up a little bit. Maine is a great number of small townships, great townships. I love traveling the state of Maine. But as you can see, we just have a smattering of votes right now. And most importantly, no offense to where those votes are coming from, by any means, every vote counts. But about half of the population of Maine lives under that line I just drew, and that's also the most Democratic, the most overwhelmingly blue part of the state. So if Democrats are making a statement tonight about Graham Plattner, either in support or trying to voice some reservations because of the recent character controversies, temperament controversies, that's where we'll find it. Portland is the largest city in Maine. It's the most populous, and along the coast right here is where you find all the Democrats. So at the moment, if you look over here, every vote counts. Graham Plattner has a 71% of the vote so far, but that's 1,182 votes. The number on the screen that counts at the moment the most is that, which is that we have about 1% of the vote counted. So we have a long way to go. At the end of the night, Caitlin, the expectation is that Mr. Plattner will be the Democratic nominee, that he will win this race. At the end of the night, what we'll be trying to figure out is add up for Governor Mills, who, as you noted, suspended the campaign, but still on the ballot. David Costello, an active candidate, but a long-shot candidate. At the end of the night, we're going to see what's his number, add up their number, and that will open the door to a big debate about, are these Democrats just venting at the moment and they'll come home to Plattner in November, or are these Democrats venting and does Plattner have a problem? When we know these numbers at the end of the night, then we'll know sort of the baseline for that debate, which will start tomorrow.
Well, and as we're waiting for more numbers to come out of Maine, there's a lot of movement that's happening in South Carolina already tonight. What are we seeing there, John?
So we're going to go down to South Carolina. I'm going to pop this up here, and I'm going to come over here. This is the race a lot of people were watching here in Washington. The president's friend at the moment, but he has been the president's foe, and friend and foe and friend and foe. Caitlin, you've been through this over the years. Lindsey Graham, CNN now projects, will win the Republican primary and win it by a margin that keeps him out of a runoff. In South Carolina, you need 50% plus one to avoid a runoff, and Lindsey Graham is getting 59% at the moment against the conservative challenger, Mark Lynch. Mark Lynch has run against Lindsey Graham, saying he shouldn't support the Iran war, shouldn't talk so much about military intervention. That's not America first. Had Lindsey Graham been forced into a runoff, he would have had to ask his friend at the moment, Donald Trump, to help him out. But Lindsey Graham is going to be the Republican nominee for Senate, and now the overwhelming favorite, Caitlin. In this year, we talk about Democrat momentum in a lot of places around the country. There's no great expectation that Democrats have a shot at Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. So winning the nomination there virtually guarantees, I shouldn't say it that clearly, but it makes him the overwhelming frontrunner in November. A quick look at the governor's race. This one appears like it could be going for a runoff, but we're not there yet. The president's preferred candidate, Pam Yvette, is the lieutenant governor. Alan Wilson is the state attorney general. So two conservatives, two established statewide winners in South Carolina at the top of that race right now, but still counting votes.
I mean, we're looking at those top three people. I don't see Nancy Mace's name on that list. She's obviously running in that race.
It's funny you would ask that, right? We're talking about the Trump dynamics there. You're right. Lieutenant Governor Yvette has the president's endorsement. Alan Wilson, for all the talk of anti-establishment, anti-incumbent sentiment, as you know, being from the South, South Carolina is a pretty establishment Republican state. They're both establishment Republicans there. They're running a competitive race at the top. You got to come way down here below the businessman Rom Reddy. Rom Reddy got into this race thinking maybe the anti-incumbent new faces theory will come to South Carolina. Not at the moment. Nancy Mace, the Congresswoman, Trump's foe at the bottom of the pack.
And I should note, John, as we are looking at those numbers, we'll check back in with you for more of what's happening in Maine and throughout South Carolina. To John's point, though, that he was just making, we do have some news in that competitive Republican primary that's playing out there. We can now project that it will go to a runoff. That's because the president's candidate there, Pamela Yvette, and the Attorney General, Alan Wilson, are going to be advancing to that runoff. And we'll see, obviously, what happens as we continue watching that in South Carolina.
Clear of TV, so I'm going to take this earpiece out of
John King at the Magic Wall will check back in with you. We've also got my colleague Arlette Saenz, who's over at Graham Plattner's headquarters in Maine. Arlette, how are they feeling? As I mean, the numbers are still incredibly early coming in tonight, but what are you hearing so far?
Well, Caitlin, Democratic Senate candidate Graham Plattner is planning to go on the attack in his speech here tonight when he addresses attendees at his primary watch party in Blue Hill. A source familiar with the draft of his speech tells me that Plattner is set to cast Collins as a spineless politician, arguing that she has portrayed herself as bipartisan and independent, but she has sided with critical votes in support of President Trump's priorities, including confirming Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. This is really highlighting how Plattner is planning to shift very quickly into general election mode, trying to drive that contrast between himself and Senator Susan Collins. But at the same time, Plattner will have a lot of work to do to ease some voters' concerns about the controversies around his campaign. Senator Susan Collins earlier today told our colleague Manu Raju that she finds the latest allegations of the way he treated past girlfriends as being very troubling and serious, and that Plattner needs to give full explanations to the voters of Maine. Republicans have made very clear that they plan to put Plattner's controversies front and center in their messaging heading into November. And there are some national Democrats who worry that this could complicate their chances of flipping this seat blue in the midterm elections. Maine will be critical and for both parties' quest to try to get the majority next year.
Yeah. Arlette, obviously, we'll check back in with you, especially if we plan to hear from Graham Plattner in this hour. We'll bring that to you live. Joining me tonight here in studio, Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California, who is supporting Graham Plattner, and also CNN political commentator and Republican strategist Shermichael Singleton, and CNN's chief national affairs correspondent Jeff Zeleny. And obviously, Jeff, as we've been watching all this play out, this race in Maine is incredibly important to Democrats here in Washington in terms of what happens in November.
It's remarkably important, and here's why. I mean, the math just is so difficult. It's an uphill challenge anyway for Democrats. They must win 5 seats currently held by Republicans and hold their own. But without Maine, the math is just so much more difficult here. But as Arlette was just saying there, one thing that Graham Plattner is going to try and do tonight is to make this a referendum on Susan Collins. Up until now, it has been a referendum on him, and that obviously is what Republicans are going to try and do as well. So this is not what anyone was expecting this Maine race would look like, obviously, because his margin is important. But one thing also, I was talking to a couple Republicans earlier today who they say, you know, look, Susan Collins always wins, and she does. She's a 5-term senator. But this environment is also different. She's running for the first time in the wake of Roe versus Wade being turned over. So we do not know what November is going to bring. One thing we do know, that Democrats really can't win the Senate without winning Maine. And boy, it's a lot more risky than they thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, and Congressman, you're backing Graham Plattner in this race. Obviously, we've seen people come out and talk about, you know, where this stands, whether or not they're still standing by Graham Plattner. It's made a lot of your colleagues uncomfortable, what has come out about him. Why not you?
Well, I was up in Maine. There were huge crowds. I think the key issue today is the anti-war platform. I mean, on a day we're retaliating against Iran, Graham Plattner is running saying, I served 3 tours of duty, and I'm opposed to these foreign wars. And he's also going to take on Susan Collins in terms of putting Kavanaugh on the court and rolling back women's rights and cutting health care. And that's why he's resonating. Now, if he's over 70%, and obviously it's early, I think that's going to be decisive. I mean, he's beaten a sitting governor. Granted, she suspended her campaign, but she kept playing cute, saying, my name is still on the ballot, you can vote for me. For someone who's not held elective office to beat a sitting governor and be around 70 or higher, I think would be pretty decisive.
But Jeff mentioned the margin that we'll be watching tonight. That means, you know, who does vote for Janet Mills in this race, given she suspended her campaign? If that number is significantly high, what will that tell you about how voters do feel about what they've learned about Graham Plattner?
Well, if there was a real protest vote and you had 40% or something still voting for other candidates, then he'd have work to do. But a sitting governor who's saying I'm still on the ballot is going to get some percent of the vote. And if he is anywhere near 70 or above, I think that's going to be pretty decisive given the enthusiasm. And I think Democrats will rally around him on an anti-war platform, on someone who's going to take out Susan Collins, who put Kavanaugh on the court, and who's voted to cut health care.
Shermichael, I mean, you heard Arlette's reporting about what he's going to say about Susan Collins.
I have, and I find that a bit ironic. For a long time now, Democrats have long argued that what fueled their passions against Trump was a sense of righteous indignation. They were standing up for justice. They were upholding morality that they said Trump was an affront to. And now what we all realize is that that was all a facade. You have this guy who's saying he's going to make a speech to make draw a contrast against himself and Susan Collins. He stands up for women. She does not, because she voted for Brett Kavanaugh. Yet we just had, not more than a week ago, very serious allegations against this very same guy who's now the defender of women. So to me, it seems like maybe a defender of women for my Democratic friends when it's convenient for them. But now that there's a political electoral opportunity to maintain their majority in the Senate, and Graham Plattner could outseat Susan Collins, you know what? It doesn't necessarily matter the 10-plus years of arguments we've made about morals and ethics against Trump and Republicans who've empowered Trump, because we can win a seat. It's very Machiavellian in many ways, and to me, any argument that Democrats have framed against Trump, against Republicans, is now null and void. They have revealed themselves to be nothing but hypocrites, nothing but liars. And I think as we get into the general election, you're going to see the case made by Susan Collins, made by the NRSC, that Democrats are not the people that they said that they are. Look at who they're supporting, the guy with the Nazi tattoo.
I mean, Congressman?
My argument against Donald Trump was that he didn't recognize a legitimate election. My argument was that he's given tax breaks to billionaires, that he has betrayed his promise to the working class and gotten us in foreign wars. He had 4 criminal trials against him. So the idea that someone who served 3 tours of duty had post-traumatic stress disorder and is acknowledging he had a dark chapter in his life and his redemption is far closer to George W. Bush's story than Donald Trump's story. I mean, he has said he was addicted to alcohol. He had an ugly chapter, and he has redeemed himself. And Americans love redemption stories. By the way, Donald Trump has never said, I haven't heard him express shame or guilt for anything.
But Congressman, if I could just rebut quickly, is Graham Plattner running against Donald Trump or Susan Collins? I understand PTSD. I know a lot of soldiers. You know, I'm a gun guy.
I know you do.
That's a big issue to me, and I care a lot about it. And the alcoholism, I don't take that for granted. A lot of Americans deal with that as well, and we should support those who are recovering from that issue. That said, this is a guy who's trying to draw a contrast against a woman who's been there a long time. She is, by all accounts, even by many of her colleagues on the Democratic side, a moderate, someone that they can work with. They have accounted on her for many times for many very serious votes against her own party. And yet Democrats are making the argument that now everything they said about Trump, about those who supported Trump, like Susan Collins, was wrong, yet somehow we should excuse them for saying that Graham Plattner is okay because they could win?
No one is questioning Susan
How do you maintain any moral authority when you make that justification?
Reid had said you can always count on Susan Collins when you don't need her. And the reality is Democrats are very upset that she put Kavanaugh on the court.
To be fair, Susan Collins once said she didn't trust Harry Reid when she was trying to keep her record in terms of voting. But I want everyone to listen to what AOC had to say in terms of what Democrats are saying about Graham Plattner here in Washington.
There's a lot in that behavior that's really challenging. It's hard to stomach, you know, in some of it. But at the end of the day, I think that this is a choice. If the choice on the ballot is between that and a senator who's voted to take health care away from millions of Americans, that's the situation that we have to weigh.
I mean, you can hear that in her voice in terms of where this race stands.
No question about it. And I mean, I think that at the end of the day, there's going to be so many outside forces coming into Maine. There are a lot of options that could happen. I mean, there could be overreach here, and there could be Maine voters just becoming so angry by the outside spending and things to do some unknown things. So I think Maine is going to be a wild card until the end. There's no doubt about it. But I'm surprised by just the number of Democratic women I speak to as well who do believe it's Plattner versus the president. And yes, I mean, perhaps early in the Trump administration, they might have been more willing to stand on principles. By year 10, I think that let's play by the same rules. That's their thinking. We shall see. I mean, but the reality here is that this is going to open the door to some other races being more competitive, probably across the country, like Iowa, other things. But let's watch his margin tonight. I think that will tell us a lot. And it's far too early right now because Maine counts sort of slowly. But let's watch his margins.
And we'll be checking in with John King on what those margins look like throughout the hour. Everyone's going to stick around. And as those votes are being tallied, we do have a new projection for a key race in California. More Republicans have been trying to defend the president's baseless allegations of fraud. What's the latest? Tonight, CNN can project that the Trump-backed Republican businessman and the former Fox News host Steve Hilton will advance to November's general election for governor of California. He'll face off against President Biden's former health secretary, Xavier Becerra, in what will be a heated race to lead the most populous state in the nation. And yes, this means a Republican is advancing in a deep blue state, despite what we've been hearing here in Washington, as Republican leaders have sought to defend President Trump's baseless allegations of election fraud in California.
It's incompetence, if nothing else. And whether or not there was actual rigging is something that have to be proven. But clearly, this is a system in California that doesn't work and doesn't inspire confidence and trust in voters.
They just keep finding ballots until the election results change. Look, whether you can prove fraud or not, it does undermine voter integrity in the vote.
Some of these efforts are so diabolical and so far upstream it is impossible to prove. But I think everybody knows instinctively something is wrong here.
It's 4 days, and they aren't even close to coming up with
That's how they count
You know
the
why
votes
they're doing
in
that?
California.
Because they're cheating on the election.
Do you have evidence to support
All I
that?
have to do is look. All I have to do is look.
Now, there's no evidence of anything fraudulent about California's election results, but one California Democrat, Congressman Ro Khanna, has been publicly agreeing that his state's election system needs to change. He is back along with our sources, and Caitlin will be back here with us in a second. Now, Congressman, you endorsed Tom Steyer in this contest. Now that he's out of the running, what are your plans?
Well, first of all, the fact that I endorsed Tom Steyer and that Tom Steyer is conceding to Stephen Hilton, a Republican, shows that there's not some conspiracy or fraud. I mean, imagine if we had said that we wanted fraud. We would want 2 Democrats there to help down ballot. But what I did say is that California needs to figure out how we count faster. We can have more people at the registrar offices. We can have more capability so that we can get the bulk of the vote counted in 48 hours, because otherwise it creates this uncertainty and these conspiracies.
I mean, do you believe that this has done irreparable damage to just the voters' confidence in the elections? And what impact could it have on congressional races in California, some of which will be very central to the House majority?
I think we're going to win 5 seats in California. We're going to be winning 4 pretty easily, and then Randy Vegas, who's an extraordinary candidate, I think will take out David Valdeo. But of course, if we had 2 Democrats, it would have helped us even more, which is why I'm saying that there's not some conspiracy or fraud. Otherwise, my candidate, Tom Steyer, would have made it. And I just want to let you know you got a Republican there. But yes, let's count these votes faster.
Despite spending tons of money, Jeff, he's still got, 3rd place, I believe. So,
close.
So this goes to show us, first of all, there isn't any fraud. I just want to say quickly.
I mean, why does the president keep harping on this if there's no fraud? Do you believe that he is trying to sort of create a predicate for November to have people question the results heading into November?
Jeff, I would hope not. And part of my concern as a strategist is that you may have some Republican voters who really trust in the president and believe, well, my vote may not count, so maybe I shouldn't turn out at all in very key and close races. We want the opposite of that. That said, a Republican is not going to win in California. I mean, God bless Arnold Schwarzenegger, but that was a very different time. When you compare what Steyer received and the guy at the top of the ticket, you put those numbers together, it's very obvious he's going to win by at least 1 million votes. But the fact that we have a Republican who was competitive suggests to me that the level of angst, anxiety, frustration among the American people is there. It's fervent, and people want someone who speaks to that. And look, I've just criticized the heck out of Graham Plattner, but I think that's probably why he's doing so well.
And let's listen to what Steve Hilton had to say about these baseless claims that California is rigging elections.
There's so many things wrong with the system. I've been saying all along that we take it very seriously because we don't want to let people down, and we've been very vigilant on it. We're keeping an eye on it. We've got teams standing by, lawyers standing by, and actually it's the same answer that actually I've been giving for a few days now. We've seen nothing that would give us cause to intervene in that way. I'm looking for positive, practical changes we can make to the system to speed it up, but also to prevent the opportunity for people to look at what's going on and say, look, there's got to be something fishy.
Now, breaking news, CNN can now project that Graham Plattner will win the Democratic nomination in Maine to run against Republican Senator Susan Collins in November. Let's go back to John King at the Magic Wall to look at the votes we're seeing so far.
So, Jeff, we have the projection. The question is, we need a lot more results to understand now that Graham Plattner will be the Democratic nominee. What is the debate in Maine? What is the debate at your table? What is the debate among national Democrats and national Republicans about, is he weakened? And if so, how much is he weakened by the last couple of weeks of character and temperament news reporting and the like. But if you see the very early results, the reason I say we need to wait for those results is you see 8% of the vote counted. He's got 75% of the vote. Our decision desk is quite comfortable that Graham Plattner is going to win the Democratic nomination tonight, which is why we project the race. But we have no votes counted down here, very few votes counted down here, the southeastern part of the state, right along the border. Half the Maine population lives in the 1st Congressional District. That is the overwhelmingly blue Democratic district. So if there is a Democratic protest vote, is there some sign of Democratic discontent or a rally to Plattner? And he wins big in these communities. We don't know yet because we don't have the votes, but that is where we will get the verdict, if you will, or at least the votes that will help us begin that debate as you play it out right here. At the moment, though, Plattner with 75%, very early on, he will be the nominee. The question is,
and John, I
how
hate
big
to
will the
interrupt
protest
you
vote?
here,
Please,
but
go ahead.
John, I hate to interrupt you here. We are going to go to Graham Plattner, who is on stage right now in Blue Hill, Maine. Let's listen.
Amy Jane, you are my best friend and the love of my life. And thank you. Over the last 9 months, I have seen Mainers come together behind a vision to take back our power from corporations and billionaires. I love every single one of you, everyone who has shown up at a town hall, who has knocked on a door, who cast their vote, not for me, but for a vision of a life in Maine that you can afford. A life of dignity and a government that actually serves its people. I want to thank our incredible campaign team and all 15,000 volunteers. You have built the most powerful grassroots movement in the history of this state. This is because of you. And when we finally defeat Susan Collins, that will be because of you too. You don't just believe in a different kind of politics, you have dedicated your time and your talents to it. It is a service to our state and to our nation, and thank you. I also want to thank Governor Janet Mills for a lifetime of service to a state that we both love. We are eternally grateful. And to any of those who feel let down or disappointed or disillusioned, it is my job to earn your trust, faith, and support. And I will spend every day of this campaign, and if I have the privilege, every day in the United States Senate doing exactly that. It is deeply humbling to stand here as your Democratic nominee. It is an honor, and I will not let you down. Until recently, I thought that harbor master would be the height of my political career. It now appears that things have changed. But it's funny, this morning was a normal one. I woke up in my home, just a few doors down from the house I grew up in. Amy and I shared a pot of coffee. We walked our dogs on the same road that I've spent most of my life on. We spent the afternoon knocking on doors and getting ready for this evening. And then we drove down here to Blue Hill, where I was born. Born in a maternity ward that has since closed. I am a son of rural Maine. I was a kid who picked blueberries under the July sun, and then one day, I was a kid who signed up and left to fight for his country. And when I returned, I carried with me the weight of forever wars and the struggle and the alienation that came with it. But I'm also a lucky one who found his way back, who found a living on the sea, and a home and a community that offered love and redemption. Redemption is not just some simple or easy destination. It's a journey. I've made mistakes in my life, mistakes that I regret, that I live with, that I continue to learn from. I'm still far from perfect. But every day, I wake up and I try to be a little bit better and a little bit kinder than I was the day before. And if you give me the chance, I will be a senator for the people who cannot afford to buy a senator. I will stand up for you and against billionaires and greedy corporations. I will serve you, the people of Maine, not some lobbyist or party boss. I will be the champion for your dreams as if it were my own, no matter the challenge or the expense. I will fight for you. I have been willing to die for my country. There is nothing that I will not do for the state of Maine. You have lifted me up. You have had my back. This is the state that raised me, and this is the state that saved me. Now, I am not a deeply religious man, and yet I cannot help but think tonight about a hymn. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Found because of the grace of the people of Maine. Grace comes when a tree falls and your neighbor brings over a chainsaw. Grace comes when your truck gives out late at night and someone you've never met stops to help you. Grace comes when you need it most and expect it least, when your parents need a hand and an old friend doesn't hesitate to go shovel the driveway. Or when a teacher, as underpaid as they are, stays late after school, gives up their own precious free time to help a kid who has fallen behind. Grace is not inevitable, but here in Maine, sometimes it feels like it is. And that is something I will never take for granted. It is a mighty gift, and one that I am committed to extending outwards. Maine, I love you. I love this state. Now the national pundits, the political establishment, they keep looking for that one story, that one headline, that one moment in my life that they can define the campaign by. But in trying so hard to understand me, they failed to understand that this is not about me at all. This is a movement about us. About the far too many working far too hard and struggling far too much at the hands of the ruling class. It is not a story of my hardship, it's of our hardship. A story of the hardship of every working Mainer. People that used to be able to stern in the summertime, plow in the winter, dig clams, and be able to send your kid off to college, but you can't anymore because that hard work, it isn't enough now. This story, the story of this campaign, it's not about how the political establishment counted me out. It's about for how far too long the political establishment has counted out the voices of every single person without the money to buy influence. But they don't know Maine. Those who think we can be fooled by a handful of billionaires, who think they can just buy elections like they buy yachts or other houses. But they don't know Maine. We will continue to show up for one another. We will be the people that fight for each other in the places that we love. We are ready for change. And they will try to make this race about everything other than what it absolutely is, a simple choice for who will represent us in the United States Senate. Susan Collins may have started her career decades ago in Washington with good intentions, but she has become just as spineless and corrupt as the establishment she now serves. She got elected promising to protect Roe versus Wade, only to turn around and put a justice of the Supreme Court who overturned it. She lied to us. Susan Collins has used her privilege and power to funnel $60 million in federal contracts, $60 million of our tax dollars, to her lobbyist husband. If that's not corruption, I don't know what is. Susan Collins has gotten 21 times wealthier just in the last 15 years. Has anybody else gotten 21 times wealthier since Susan Collins was elected to office? Does Maine have 21 times the schools and hospitals? No. We have less. Susan Collins is getting rich while we're getting screwed. The last time she ran for office, she received more money from private equity than any other member of Congress, including some of the same private equity companies that shuttered the mills here in Maine. And ever since then, she has stood by and done nothing while they have bought up nursing homes, local businesses, the last of the houses we could afford, stripped our communities for parts. Hell, they bought the Boston Red Sox. And Susan Collins has never met a war she didn't like. She's been supporting endless wars since I was a teenager, and I know I had to fight in 2 of them. Senator Collins, I got blown up while you handed out billions of dollars to defense companies that invest in you. Sorry, that you're invested in. You and your friends profited, and my friends died. Susan Collins has voted to send billions of our taxpayer dollars to fund other people's wars. Susan Collins, how do you justify closing hospitals in Maine while using our tax dollars to destroy them halfway around the world? If you reflect Maine's values, why are you funding masked agents who are ripping our neighbors off the streets, driving them off in unmarked vans? That is not the freedom that I served 4 tours defending. If you are an independent voice, why do you vote with Donald Trump 95% of the time? If you're so bipartisan, why were you the deciding vote to put Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court? The deciding vote to defund our health care and our hospitals. Why did you rubber stamp the greatest redistribution of wealth from the working class to the ruling class in the history of our nation? Susan Collins is only bipartisan when it doesn't matter. Susan Collins calls herself the gold standard of common sense. Common sense would be Mainers not having to choose between seeing a doctor or paying your mortgage. Common sense would be banning billionaires from buying elections. And it would also be giving workers the same seat at the table as CEOs. Common sense would be a minimum wage that's a living wage. It would be keeping our hospitals open and our schools funded and our kids from having to fight in another generation of forever wars.
Just let him finish his sentence and then let's go.
Common sense would be releasing the Epstein files. Should be unafraid of upsetting the wannabe king to whom Susan Collins bows. Susan Collins said she would only serve 2 terms.
You have been listening to Graham Plattner, fresh off a projection that he will be the Democratic candidate for Senate in Maine. And if his speech that you've just been listening to voters is any indication of what the next several months here are going to look like, it's going to be an incredibly ugly race there in Maine. He named Susan Collins multiple times, as you heard directly in that speech, as Arlette Saenz previewed earlier, was expected after it was projected that he would be the winner of this tonight. My political panel is back with me, and Jeff, thank you for earlier. But I mean, just listening to that, I mean, one of his most cutting line, and there was a lot about Susan Collins in there. He said she's only bipartisan when it doesn't matter.
Look, I mean, as we were saying, Susan Collins has had a lot of races. This will be her toughest race. There's no doubt about it. Just listening to everything that he was saying there, talking about she voted for a war that he was in. But I think this is still about Graham Plattner. And he started to pivot. The question is, can he successfully pivot? I think, perhaps the most important line and the biggest question for the next 5 months, do Maine voters trust him? And he said, to all those who feel let down, disappointed, or disillusioned, it's my job to earn your trust. So that is, I think, the challenge for him, to earn the trust as Republican ads start pummeling him about his character and things. So if there's no shoe to drop, perhaps this moves on, but that's an open question for one. But for two, I think the challenge is still making this about Susan Collins. And yes, he's doing it in this speech here, but this is the easiest night of the rest of the campaign for him. It gets much harder come morning.
Yeah, I mean, Susan Collins has obviously been a political powerhouse in Maine, as Jeff noted earlier, how she's prevailed in these races before. When you listen to that, Congressman, as someone who has obviously endorsed him, he's going after Susan Collins. He mentioned the Epstein files, and obviously that's been something that you've led the charge on here in Washington. He said that she's never met a war she didn't like. I mean, do you think those are going to be effective attacks come this November?
Susan Collins is formidable, but Graham has had a terrific night. When it looks like he's going to be near 75% of the vote, that's a big thing. And his speech showed both humility and strength. He talked about Maine giving him grace, Maine giving him a second chance. He talked about the need to earn people's votes. So this was not an arrogant speech. He understands he needs to do work, and he understands they're giving him a chance at redemption. And yet he was strong. He said, I'm going to tax the billionaires. I'm not going to have these foreign wars. I'm going to take on the corporate interests and PAC money. I'm going to call for the release of the Epstein files. We have not had a candidate with that kind of clarity and strength run against Collins.
Perhaps clarity, but not moral clarity. He talked about grace. He had several different lines about grace. What about the grace for the women who made serious allegations against him, reported in the New York Times? He talked about Susan Collins being corrupt. He talked about Susan Collins voting to give funding to ICE, taking our neighbors and putting them in unmarked vans. So now he's a warrior for minorities. The same guy with a Nazi tattoo, and he didn't know it was a Nazi tattoo, or the only people I know who get Nazi tattoos on their chest are actual Nazis. This is going to be an election about character. Now, the voters in Maine may not like every single thing about Susan Collins, but Susan Collins is a woman who broke a lot of history, who does have bipartisan support, who has not always voted with her party. She's not a person who supports women merely when it's convenient for her, as we're seeing with Graham Plattner, who I thought it was very ironic that he was surrounded by a ton of women in the midst of giving this campaign speech. This will come down to someone they know versus a guy who uses and says whatever he has to say to get his way, and I don't think it's going to work.
We will see what happens. Obviously, it's going to be an ugly campaign between the two of them. We're also following other breaking news tonight as we're watching these races. The U.S. is launching strikes against Iran again. Iran now says they are retaliating. My global affairs source will join us right after this. Moments ago, the United States military announced the U.S. has completed its strikes against Iran in response to the downing of an Army Apache helicopter off the coast of Oman last night. Earlier, we heard the United States confirming they had launched what officials were describing as, quote, self-defense strikes at 5 p.m. Eastern at President Trump's direction, which they described as a mission of a proportional response to the helicopter's downing. Now, 2 Army pilots had been rescued uninjured last night by an uncrewed drone boat. And the U.S. attack on Iran came after we heard from the president saying earlier that the United States must respond of necessity, respond to this attack. Iranian media reported that explosions had been heard in southern Iran after the U.S. announced those new strikes. And shortly after, Iran's military said that it had launched missiles and drones toward United States targets in the region, including the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. Now, all of this is happening after President Trump predicted just yesterday to voters in South Carolina that the United States was 2 weeks away from what he described as total victory in Iran. And Vice President J.D. Vance told Robert Costa of CBS News this just today.
Right now, I feel that we are in a position to get a deal that is good for the United States economically and that really does deal with the Iranian nuclear program, not just now, not just while Donald Trump is president, but for the long term, to where my kids can say when they're adults, Iran is not going to have a nuclear weapon.
You say very close. How soon? Could the deal happen before the midterm elections?
Oh, absolutely. No, I think we're going to know a lot before the midterm elections. Look, I think that the deal could happen in the next week, but the deal could also happen months from now.
Also joining us tonight is National Security, is the former Middle East and North Africa coordinator at the National Security Council, Brett McGurk, as well as my political sources, Shermichael and Jeff. And Brett, when you listen to what the vice president's saying there, what the president was saying yesterday, and then you see these attacks between the United States and Iran, what's your sense of what's going on? And also, some people might see that Iran was able to down an Apache helicopter and say, I thought their capabilities were totally decimated.
Yeah, Caitlin, the White House really wants a deal, and Iran is showing no indications they're ready to do a deal other than on the terms they're demanding, which includes a lot of upfront unfreezing of assets, which the president said he's not going to do. But if you go back just in the last 8 days, Caitlin, the Iranians attacked a ship off the coast of Kuwait. They fired missiles and drones at Kuwait and Bahrain. They attacked the civilian airport in Kuwait City. We had another exchange of fire a few days ago. And then we've had this incident. This is kind of the new normal in the Gulf until there is a deal, because what's happening at night, ships are getting through. The Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, said today that actually a meaningful number of ships, in his words, didn't put a number on it, are getting through. These ships are turning off their responders. We're kind of helping protect them. I'm sure that's likely what that Apache helicopter is doing. And Iran is trying to target those ships with Shahed drones. That's happening every night right now in the Gulf. So until we have a deal of some kind, this is the new normal. And what I am predicting here is that this is going to continue for some time. I just don't see the stars aligning for the agreement the White House keeps talking about.
When CENTCOM described this as a proportional response, is that how you see what we know about these attacks so far tonight?
Yeah, I saw that language was very carefully, it said complete. We have completed our response. They're sending a message that this is over. Now, here's the thing about the Iranians, Caitlin. They always demand the last thing. In a negotiation, they always demand the last edit to a text. In an exchange of fire, they always demand the last shot. You might remember when President Trump ordered the strike against Soleimani, Iran then launched a series of missiles at our base, and it kind of put a ceiling on it there. So what's happening now, as I understand it, there are sirens in Bahrain. The Iranians are saying they're launching some missiles towards Bahrain. That could be it. But again, until there's a deal, this is going to keep going on because Iran is targeting ships in the Gulf, and we're trying to protect those ships.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Zeleny, as you look at what's happening, and you heard what the vice president said to Robert Costa, I mean, he's saying absolutely by the midterms. I mean, we also had heard that the war was going to be 4 to 6 weeks at the beginning of this.
And we're more than 100 days now. He said weeks or months. I mean, the reality here is the time, the urgency is in the favor of the Iranians. I mean, the midterm elections are a huge pressure point for the president. I was with the president in Wisconsin on Friday. He was trying to appeal to farmers that the Iran war will be over soon. Your diesel prices will go down. Your fertilizer prices will go down. He kept saying it would be over soon, but it doesn't really match the reality of what is actually happening on the ground in the Middle East there. So, how many times have we heard the president say it's on the verge of being over? And it's not that a case at all. So I think that it is as big of a challenge, and we'll see what morning brings. I mean, when these strikes happen. I mean, this is a new retaliation that we haven't seen for a while.
Yeah, and we saw Iran's foreign minister saying that they're going to respond to this. I mean, when we look at this in terms of the context of tonight, sure, Michael, and the midterm elections, sure. I mean, Graham Plattner is bringing up wars right now while going off on Susan Collins in that speech tonight.
Yeah, and many Democrats have lately, as they prepare for the midterms and prepare for general elections, as they make it out of their primaries. I see two problems here. One, you have Iran as a quasi-superpower. What do I mean? They don't have nuclear capabilities, but they now have the capabilities to constrict the world's economy. That is just terrible for our allies in that part of the world and terrible for the American consumer as the costs are going through the roof. Two, you have the electoral component of this where Republicans want to make the case to Republican voters, but also to independent voters in the general election that we are prioritizing cost of living, energy costs. We do recognize that things are still a bit unaffordable. We're working on tackling those things at lower cost. It's very, very difficult to do that so long as this is a prolonged issue. So I understand why the president wants to expedite this. I just think we have to get there quicker. You have early voting that starts in September. It's almost July, I guess I could effectively say. That gives you really 60 days to try to wrap this up. We've seen months of the president trying to wrap this up, and so far I don't think we're any closer today than we were just a month ago.
Yeah, I mean, and Brett, as you look at this, obviously the president, he has said he doesn't care about the midterms, that that's not a determining factor in his decision-making here, but obviously there's a lot of people in the White House who work on the political side of this that are looking at this.
Yeah, the Iranians are looking at that calendar too, and they're going to try to string this out, and that time's going to go fast. Sure, Michael just put the calendar, political calendar on. 2 months ago today, we were supposed to start a ceasefire because President Trump announced 2 months ago we have a ceasefire and the Strait would open. That was on April 8th, and that did not happen. The Strait is still closed. So those 2 months will go by fast. The Iranians are going to wait this out, Caitlin. That's my prediction. They know they got to squeeze. They're going to wait this out. Now, their economic pain is compounding too inside because of our blockade. But in terms of the two runways, I think ours is a lot shorter than theirs. That's at least how they see it. So I don't see them coming to the table to do the deal on the terms that the president seems to be demanding, at least.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, that is certainly something that is clear, and they've been happy to invoke it, even in terms of domestic politics here at home. Brett McGurk will obviously been watching this closely with you. Jeff Zeleny, Shermichael Singleton. It's great to have all of you here tonight. And thank you all so much for joining us on this busy election night here at CNN. We're going to continue following all the results here, and CNN News Night with Abby Phillip starts right now.
Tonight, the results are in. We learn the fates of a Trump ally, a Trump snub, and a Democrat whose past is giving the party trouble. Plus, the bro test. MAGA tries to make masculinity an issue in the midterms.
I mean, this guy, if a stiff breeze came by, it would blow him over like a feather.
Also, as Donald Trump has said an Iran deal is imminent at least 38 times, one Republican compares him to a cartoon.
We're Charlie Brown and Iran is Lucy, and every time we go kick the ball, it's been taken away.
And rain on the birthday party. Fewer Americans see the U.S. as exceptional, and only a quarter say the nation stands above others. Live at the table, Adam Mockler, Caroline Sunshine, Sabrina Singh, T.W. Origi, and L.Z. Granderson. Americans with different perspectives aren't talking to each other, but here they do.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good evening. I'm Abby Phillip in New York. We're following breaking news tonight on a number of key primary races across the country with control of Congress at stake. One of the most consequential contests is unfolding in the state of Maine, where Democrat Graham Plattner just clinched the state's nomination for the United States Senate. That's despite a slew of scandals that he has faced in the months leading up to tonight's vote.
And to any of those who feel let down or disappointed or disillusioned, it is my job to earn your trust, faith, and support. And I will spend every day of this campaign, and if I have the privilege, every day in the United States Senate doing exactly that.
Plattner will face longtime GOP Senator Susan Collins in a crucial matchup, and Democrats will almost certainly need to win it if the party hopes to flip the chamber in the fall. We're also keeping an eye on South Carolina, where Republican Senator Lindsey Graham just punched his ticket for November without a runoff. And in the state's GOP primary for governor, Congresswoman Nancy Mace is admitting defeat in a race that has tested the power of President Trump's influence and his endorsement. Instead, Trump backed Lieutenant Governor Pam Yvette, and she will advance to the runoff later this month, along with Attorney General Alan Wilson. But let's start with Maine and the Graham Plattner of it all. He gave a pretty defiant speech tonight. He attacked Susan Collins, but basically he was arguing this is a redemption narrative, right? He quoted a hymn, "I was once lost and now I'm found," though he admitted that he's not very religious. Nevertheless, we've heard this from many a politician before. Is it enough?
I think it remains to be seen if it's enough. And what I'm curious on to see is, what do the vote totals look like? I mean, how much did Janet Mills pull from Graham Plattner? Because that's going to be really a big indicator of how much he's going to have to win when it comes to Maine voters. At the end of the day, I mean, I think Graham Plattner is a very flawed candidate. I think if I were a Mainer today, I would have probably cast my vote for Janet Mills. I think every moment that we talk about Graham Plattner and his scandals or whatever it is, we're losing time talking about the issues that matter to voters, which is, as we know, affordability and gas prices. And I think we're taking away from candidates who are putting competitive seats in play, like in Iowa, Ohio, even in Texas in the Senate race, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I think Graham Plattner is going to have a wave to overcome. And I don't know if there's more coming out, but if there is, he's going to have to brace for that.
There probably is more coming out, don't you think, Adam?
There could be, but we are now witnessing the post-cancellation, post-purity style of politics that the Republican Party has ushered in. I'm not going to sit here and defend things Graham Plattner did in his past. Not even Graham Plattner defends these things that he did in his past. But we have watched for a decade as Republicans have repeatedly lowered the threshold, lowered the standards for their candidates. And now Democrats are going to keep holding our candidates to an infinitely higher standard while we have Ken Paxton in Texas, while we have Donald Trump sitting in the Oval Office right now. And I guess it remains to be seen, but I also want to rephrase.
Is it a high standard or is it a low standard?
Listen,
because I'm not sure that he's being held to a higher standard than anybody else.
Well, but the Republican Party is absolutely holding him to a higher standard than they hold their own candidates. I mean, Donald Trump had a sit-down dinner with Nick Fuentes, and the very same people who were silent about that are now clutching their pearls about this admittedly weird tattoo that Graham Plattner has apologized for.
And it's a Nazi tattoo, Adam.
I'm not...
Acknowledge that. It's not weird. It's a Nazi tattoo.
It's awful, yeah.
So, I mean, look, Democrats now I hear what you're saying. And I know we've had conversations with you, Caroline, about similar things. But basically, Democrats are saying that we're going to go lower. they go low, we go just as low.
I think that Democrats are trying to reframe this away from Graham Plattner's personality and towards a race between Graham Plattner versus Susan Collins. Susan Collins is somebody who rubber stamps all of Donald Trump's worst impulses, from stripping health care away from tens of millions of Americans that will lead to death. We talked about the affordability issues. We talked about Susan Collins rubber-stamped Kristi Noem, which led to the death of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. So I'm not going to sit here and judge Mainers who want to push against the status quo. It's not my place to judge. If Graham Plattner can earn their trust, then he earns their trust.
But I think what's missing in the analysis here is that Graham Plattner just won a Democrat primary by running on the best aspects of President Trump's 2024 campaign platform. If you look at Graham Plattner's platform, he ran on no foreign intervention in the Middle East, no new wars. He ran on D.C. has been working for the elites and it has stopped working for the working class, which is very similar to President Trump's original drain the swamp message. He ran on bringing back U.S. manufacturing, working class issues. He's an anti-establishment working class candidate.
That's the Democratic Party.
Here's what you guys are missing.
She is making an important point.
He ran on that, and that's what he won.
This is a version of the type of politics, a type of populism on the left that Trump ran. At least he ran on it on the right. I'm not sure we could argue he governed quite that way, but he ran on it.
My gut tells me this is a byproduct of the wrapping of the messenger as much as it is the message itself. He looks like a dude. Let's just say what it is. He's got the scruff. He's got the edge. At a moment in which Democrats were...
I actually would say
it's the politics.
I don't think it's that.
Allow me to finish, though. Allow me to finish, because it's actually the Democrats who did this whole autopsy on what it is to be masculine.
Did you guys? Did you ever notice that?
I've
never seen it.
Allow me to finish. It's the Democrats who did this whole analysis about what it means to be masculine. They didn't do that because there wasn't a problem there. They didn't do that because there wasn't something that was happening on the right that they couldn't tap into. When I look at Graham Plattner, the first thing I think of, he looks like a dude. And he looks like someone who looks very different than many of the men who lead the Democratic Party. And I think that is an appealing aspect that Democrats need to talk about.
And maybe the flaws are part of that package.
No. You are correct, LZ, with that part. He looks like a dude. And when he first entered the race and he said, I'm an oyster farmer, I said, uh-oh, we got problems. Turns out he's not an oyster farmer. Turns out he's not a low-class guy. Went to Hotchkiss, got a bunch of money. He isn't what he says he is. Now, this isn't a reframing about turning this to Susan Collins. Susan Collins is the Republican every Democrat wishes every Republican was.
No.
She convicted Donald Trump.
No.
Yes, she worked with Joe Biden on a bunch of stuff. She is as bipartisan as they come.
No, she's not. She rubber stamps everything. Susan Collins is the
garbage. And by the way, come November, just like 6 years ago, just like we were seeing garbage polls about Lindsey Graham in South Carolina, we saw garbage polls about Susan Collins in Maine. Come November, she's going to wipe the floor with Graham. All these stories, Susan Collins in Maine, Mainers don't want to be put in a moral quandary of saying Nazi tattoo versus.
But when they learn about his scandals, just to be clear, when voters learn about Graham Plattner's scandals, you're going to like this. Trust me, just you wait. You're going to love me saying this. When voters learn about Graham Plattner's scandals, he beats Susan Collins. He goes up in the polls, 48 to 43. Republicans, I'm telling you, you got it off on talking about his scandal. You have to talk about the fact that he wants to abolish ICE, which is a position that 70% of Americans do not support.
Start talking about that platform that he's talking about.
Yeah,
I think that is it's not President Trump's platform. I mean, President Trump ran on affordability. And they lost the
no
thread.
new wars.
We have lost, and all of that has completely changed right now with President Trump in office. And I think to the point of Graham Plattner, he's not only someone that doesn't look like the establishment, but you look at the contrast between him and Janet Mills, someone who is the sitting governor of Maine, and people want change. I mean, people are seeing what Donald Trump came in on and was elected on, and they're not getting the results that they voted for, and they look at someone like Graham Plattner, who I'm not defending, but I'm saying is offering something different.
Well, he's offering Trump's 2024 original platform, which is the winning one.
Well,
everybody should stick to that if they want to win elections.
Donald Trump flipped on it.
Great, then more times we're going to win. If we're talking about affordability, we're going to win on that.
We talked about the swamp. The contrast that we need to make is between Susan Collins and Graham Plattner. Janet Mills is done. So Susan Collins is a definition of a swamp creature. She promised she would run for 2 terms. She's now running for her 6th term after her net worth is increased by 2,000%.
What did Mark Warner say about that? What did half the
She is
Democrats
running
in the
for.
Senate say
She is
about
the
that?
definition of the swamp. The Senate currently has a 12% approval rating. So if Mainers Want to gain trust in Graham Plattner?
Will you
Scandals
oppose
or
Mark
not?
Warner when he runs for re-election?
I'm talking about Susan Collins versus Graham
we got to be
Plattner.
consistent.
I also am not going to take this pearl clutching from Republicans who have zero to say about Donald Trump having dinner with Nick Fuentes. Have you condemned that?
Yeah.
Have you condemned that? I looked through your
Nick
Twitter. I didn't
Fuentes
see it.
stinks.
Have you
Clear, I don't
condemned
tweet
Donald
very much.
Trump for having dinner with Nick Fuentes?
I would not be having dinner
you're
with
falling
Nick
into
Fuentes.
the same
No.
trap.
But
this is beyond the point, dude.
It's not.
I am the most. I am awfully
You have
critical of
standards
Donald
down
Trump.
here, and we match you, and you say,
That
what the
is
hell? You have
okay,
standards
wait a minute,
down
wait a
here, and we
minute.
match you.
That-
Trump
okay,
had dinner
so
with a
Nazi
Nazi.
tattoos good. So that's okay now because Donald Trump
you
set
set the
this other
standard.
way.
No one's
I would
defending
never
the
defend
Nazi
that.
tattoos.
Why would I ever
No one's
defend
defending the
that?
Nazi
Well, I know,
tattoo.
but where is the standard? Why
The
does
standard is
two
what you
wrongs
set
don't make
when
a
Donald
right?
Trump
Is that
had
not
dinner
true?
with Nick Fuentes.
You
Can you
guys are
condemn
missing
it?
the
It's
point,
not
which
just
is
a
that the
You can't
voters
condemn it.
don't
You can't
care.
condemn it.
Criticism
It
by
was
both
put in
sides.
front of the voters, and they don't care.
I want to. There's some other news that happened tonight in California. Steve Hilton earned his way onto the ballot for the general election, a Republican, and this is happening at the same time that there's all this talk about rigged elections in California by Republicans with no evidence whatsoever. So, I mean, how do you explain this phenomenon? A Republican now in the runoff.
Because every single Democrat in that primary was asked a question on the debate stage, and I call it the Kamala Harris test, which they all failed, which is they were all asked the question, Gavin Newsom, how has he handled homelessness in the state? What grade would you give him? And they all go, well, I think I'd give him an A. Well, I think I'd give him a B, which if you ask anybody in the state of California, homelessness has become an international embarrassment to that state. I mean, when I go overseas and people hear I'm from California, they go, you guys have a lot of homelessness there, right? I'm like, oh my God, I'm in Asia and you've heard of this. I don't understand. So a Republican was able to make it in because there's a lot of disaffected voters in California that feel that the state has been in decline for the last decade, and he ran moderate enough that he got in.
Totally. No voter fraud, though. No. Right?
The voter fraud was never really a real thing. I think what we're witnessing in California is a frustration with the homelessness, though, being shocked.
It's abysmal. It's embarrassing.
Well,
it's inhumane.
Yes, all over the country, honestly,
but
not just
in
California.
Largest state, highest homeless
I'm from
population.
LA.
Largest
I'm
population.
from
Listen,
LA.
I lived in LA. I worked for LA Times. I lived downtown. I lived around the corner from where the homelessness is at the epicenter. So I know it very well. I don't need a lecture about it. But what I will say is I've also experienced it in Chicago. I've experienced it in a small town like Kalamazoo, Michigan. I've experienced it all over New York. I've experienced it in Phoenix. It's everywhere. So until we get the attitude that homelessness is an epidemic all over the country and not California's problem, we're not going to solve it. Now, when it comes to Mr. Hilton, I think the thing that makes him intriguing is the fact that he doesn't just talk about solving the problem. Because he has this business background, there's a belief that he'll know how to actually solve the problem and not just talk about solving the problem. I think that's what the outcome of the primary shows. His business background.
I think no matter what happens, like even though he has emerged as the person that is going to face Javier Becerra in November, California has not voted for a Republican in 20 years. I mean, since Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think Californians are going to rally around Becerra. It was a very tough primary for Democrats, and I think you're going to see that in November we will be saying Governor Becerra.
But it's interesting because, I mean, this is perhaps one of the ripest moments for a Republican or a center-right candidate to run in California. And it strikes me that Hilton, he's in the runoff and probably helped by an incredibly fractured Democratic field. But Spencer Pratt in LA, maybe the biggest problem is that they have latched themselves to Donald Trump, who is, despite all the flaws of California, a very toxic figure in the state.
Well, what you see with Steve Hilton right now, especially separating from Donald Trump on voter fraud allegations, he's trying to pivot even more to the center. All politics is local, especially in a statewide election. And in California, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, whether it's homelessness or a number of other issues, we've heard Democrats on this network tonight just talk about the litany of problems California has. People are upset with the people in power. And especially when you're running for governor, it should be state-focused, 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 local, local, local. If Steve Hilton can keep pivoting that way, hopefully he can grow that vote share. It's going to be really hard. Spencer Pratt, a lot of people who did vote for him who weren't traditional Republicans said it was because he had creative ideas for homelessness, for fire prevention, for rebuilding, etc. But it wasn't enough because it's L.A.
But the election, this California election, wasn't an indictment of President Trump's political brand. It was an indictment of Gavin Newsom's political brand because he has run the state. He's the incumbent governor. If people felt that the state was going in the right direction, that he had done a great job, Steve Hilton wouldn't have made it in the top 2. So for a
Well,
guy
that's
who
a
wants to
different
run in
conversation.
2028, FYI, your political brand is a lot more toxic than you think.
You started the argument saying one specific issue was about homelessness, which I agree with. I think his conversation about homelessness is a big question mark. But I think overall there's a lot of joy.
Well, even Barack Obama said that Gavin Newsom's done a terrible job on homelessness.
Yes, and I've already conceded the homelessness point to you. But also, I do know that California has one of the highest economies on the planet.
And highest cost of living.
And so in order to have one of the highest economies on the planet, you can't be a complete F-up. So I think Gavin Newsom deserves some credit about what he's been doing during his tenure as well.
Well, and I think the top 2 would look different if that were true.
Next for us, the bro factor. MAGA tries to use masculinity as an issue in the midterms, including in this new AI-generated ad that puts a Democratic candidate in a dress. Plus, more breaking news tonight. The U.S. has launched retaliatory strikes against Iran after it downed a helicopter. This comes as Republicans compare Trump to Charlie Brown in this war. Tonight, with the midterms approaching, Republicans are targeting Texas Senate hopeful James Tallarico, a Democrat with a barrage of attacks on his masculinity. A new AI-generated political ad from an outside Republican group purporting to show Tallarico wearing a dress is only the latest in a slew of personal insults intended to portray him as weak. Watch this.
Boys in white dresses with blue satin sashes, girls dust with hormones till they grow mustaches, changing the gender of all your offspring. These are a few of my favorite things.
In many cases, the attacks are homophobic, transphobic, and rely on easily disproven cases. Others are based on parts of Tallarico's own comments. But the truth doesn't appear to be the point of any of this.
I got to say, if you were making a list of 1,000 adjectives to describe this guy, masculine would not be one of them. I mean, this guy, if a stiff breeze came by, it would blow him over like a feather.
To nominate their first transgender Senate candidate who's clearly transitioning into a female. You know, when Tallarico goes in for a blood test, when he gets a physical, blood doesn't come out. Instead, soy milk comes out.
Did you know that he looks prepubescent?
These are the notes you took?
Did you know that he looks like the guy that leaves an apple on the teacher's desk? He's also 37 and not married.
A candidate that believes in 6 genders, and he takes hits at Jesus Christ, and he's wearing a mask 6 months ago, and he's a vegan. He's a vegan in Texas.
So, Elsie, you were just talking about the problems that Democrats have with masculinity and how they're portrayed. I mean, do you think that that's why Republicans are going down this route, and will it work?
Well, absolutely, this is why they're going down this path. It's just the messengers. I just can't. It's just.
Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz? Talking about masculinity? I mean, I'm gay, right? If you talk smack about my husband, you probably got some issues with me, and I'm not going to be easy about it. He rolled over pretty easy, you know, politically speaking. And I'm just
When
like,
Trump attacked
when
his
Trump attacked his wife,
yeah.
and he attacked his family, and he attacked his character, and there he is, still right there. And so I'm looking at him, it's like my definition of masculinity has a lot to do with what's on the inside. Integrity, things like honesty, civic duty, a sense of something greater than yourself,
Not
a
fleeing
provider.
Texas to go to the Four Seasons Cancun.
Not leaving your dog behind as you do that.
And then blaming your teenage daughter.
So you know, when I think about masculinity, I think, you know, try not to cheat on your wife. And if you do, you apologize and not cheat on a second. And if you do apologize, not, you know, so those are the things that I consider masculine as a gay person. But as I said, I'm gay, so maybe I don't know. Maybe masculine means something else.
Any of the straight guys at the table.
Yeah.
Well, no, I agree. My definition of masculinity definitely precludes people who shill for somebody that offended their wife, as you said. It definitely precludes people who dipped out of their own state in order to avoid a natural disaster. Definitely precludes people who cheat on their wife with a porn star or cheat on their wife overall, like Ken Paxton. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's honesty. It's civic duty. It's the ability to be genuine and to care about those around you. Masculinity isn't sending endless dollars overseas while refusing to take care of the people that voted for you. That's to Ted Cruz and to Donald Trump. And one more thing, these AI ads need to be banned. I think that like AI is the best thing to happen to the Republican Party because they now can create fake information to substantiate the fake information that they spew.
They're
Trump
hilarious,
sends
and they're very effective with voting.
Well, I think you're onto
sounds like
something on the AI
It's not
ads. Like
censorship.
I think these types of ads in particular, Republicans have to be really careful because they will backfire. And Democrats can do the same thing to Republicans. And I think there has to be some type of regulation when it comes to something like this. I mean, that is clearly false and you know,
but here's the thing:
propaganda.
It's not hard to tell that it's.
Well,
AI
I mean, tell that to my like old great grandpa or whatever. It's hard.
It's obviously.
You know that, but like, is it obvious
They
to
are
the average
targeting
person?
But I just say I agree that I just don't know how effective they are because
I
the
mean-
idea. You know, we were told that Spencer Pratt was going to win the LA mayor's race off a couple of AI videos, and that turned out to
I
not
say
be
Democrats
Yeah,
don't have to
but-
create the AI videos because we can just say, look at Ken Paxton who cheated on his wife.
But you know what's great about those ads is it puts political consultants on both sides of the aisle out of business. The amount of money that political consultants who are establishment and horrible at their jobs in this country make off of making basic TV political ads, when the average American can now just go be far more creative and make something off of AI, is phenomenal. And anybody saying otherwise is just not cut
Is
up
there
for
a
the
threshold
future.
for the likeness that you can use of somebody? Can you just
Well,
completely distort them?
There's no, it's Wild West right now, but those are great ads. No, but here's
I
the
don't know.
bigger.
I have a feeling political consultants are not going.
Yeah,
out of business anytime soon.
I hope they do.
I do want to just make a just
Yeah,
to make a
bookmark
bigger
that.
point. You know, this idea of attacking people's masculinity. This is also part of the Trump era. I mean, he's been since 2016 doing this with his political opponents, including many Republicans. Listen.
When little Marco spews his crap about the size of my hands, which are big, the size of my hand. So I looked at him, I said, Marco? No, I just wanted to say, look at that. Those hands can hit a golf ball 285 yards. Little Marco.
Mini Mike just got out, and he's going to, try and save face by putting some money into Biden's campaign.
Mini Mike, little Ben Sass, little pencil neck, Adam Schiff. He is not a long ball hitter.
People like him a lot, and he's against tampon Jim.
It's actually a little bit related to what we were talking about in the last segment, which is so much of the political culture right now is an offshoot of Trump. It's an offshoot of what he created in this political atmosphere, and it's not about issues anymore. It's about these kinds of smears of people.
Yeah, and look, Donald Trump has been in the public eye for 40 years, building a brand for himself before he even ran for president. He became famous for "You're fired." He became famous for quotes in tabloids, in the New York Post, about his dating life. He was crass, he was brash, he was vulgar, he was a billionaire, he flew high, and people knew him as that. He is a one of one that cannot be replicated, and when other people try to be the same as him, they fail. Oh yeah, not for nothing, even if you hate Donald Trump, he's still funny, and his comedic timing is really good. Is he mean sometimes? Yes. Does he say horrible things sometimes? Of course, but he still is funny, and that's why people are drawn to him. James Tallarico, is he Rambo? Of course not. Did the Democrats lose a lot of ground with a lot of young men across the country in the last election? Yes, they alienated the Barstool gang. They alienated all sorts of different segments of the male audience because, as Rahm Emanuel said, they were woke and weak. But I think it's bigger than masculinity, and I agree with a lot of what you said about what masculinity is, and I agree with you on that, LZ. But I would go beyond it. It's normalcy and it's authenticity.
Neither of
People
which
want
Tallarico
normal-
have.
People, yeah, true.
I disagree
but,
with
but
that.
hold on, but hold on.
I
But at least in
disagree.
Texas, he is not probably what you would call the average
Anywhere,
male
not
voter.
just Texas.
But be that what it may, the problem is there's not enough normalcy in our politics. There's not enough people are like, I like this guy. He seems normal to me. He likes the same things I like. We could sit down, talk, have a few beers, and have a few laughs. But why aren't there more normal people in politics? Because what normal person with functioning brain cells would want to enter this political climate? It's really hard.
I actually think Tallarico is reaching across. I mean, that's why he was able to be successful in that Senate primary, because he was able to reach Republicans and independent, or just across voters. But hold on just a sec. I think that if Republicans choose to make this race about masculinity and don't focus on the issues that matter, like your energy prices, your gas prices, your grocery prices, I think Tallarico and someone like Gina Hinojosa have a real path to victory, not just in Texas, but other candidates in Iowa or Ohio or wherever in this country, because we're actually talking about the issues that matter, and people want someone to deliver for them. And Democrats are running on those issues.
The Democrat Party got it so wrong in Texas. You guys had a hilarious black woman, and for the party that lectures everybody about racism, you guys pushed her aside so you could have a soy boy white guy who was created in a lab and looks like what political consultants think a regular white guy looks like.
No one pushed
be the
her
nominee.
aside. They
By the way,
no
he
one
thinks there's
endorsed
6
in that
genders.
way.
All right,
Can you mention 6 genders? How many genders do you think
First of
there
all,
are? How many genders are there?
I would like to
I just
say,
want to know what the DNC
I
autopsy
would like
report
to
that I've
say
never seen says.
Representative Crockett
How many
is more
genders
than
are
just
there?
a funny person.
Oh, she should have been your pick.
And Tallarico
she was
is more,
authentic. She had charisma,
and
she
Tallarico
would have
is
beaten
more
whoever
than
the
a
Republicans
quote-unquote
put up.
soy kind
But
of
we got
guy.
it right, and you guys got it
Okay,
wrong.
so-
How did you get it right with someone that's been indicted by their own party?
And you guys picked.
How did you get it right by someone that's been indicted by their own
6
party?
genders.
One at a time, please.
This is what I would say to you in regards to Texas. Based upon our reporting, based upon having lived there, I think the reasons why Tallarico will have a difficult time has nothing to do with the perception of masculinity, though I think it plays in the east side
Well, I
of the
just think
state.
it's 6 genders and that he thinks the
I
border
don't think
should be a
that's it.
welcome
Not in a state that elected an openly gay person in Houston, an openly gay person currently in San Antonio, and Austin has more gay people than any other state or any other major city outside of Chicago, L.A., and of course New York.
Okay,
so
but how
listen,
many
so
genders
listen,
are there?
so,
Okay,
so,
hold on.
so in terms of identity and trying to pick on someone for being queer, I don't know how that's going to play. I think the issues with Democrats in Texas has been for the last 2 decades are 2 reasons. One, the conversation about green energy and clean energy and how that impacts the oil industry, because a lot of people of color get good jobs working in the oil industry, and that's one of the reasons why they tend to vote Republican. And also, 2, the immigration conversation. Democrats do not handle that well because they tend to quote Washington, D.C. as opposed to talk like they live in Texas. If you talk like you live in the Southwest, you have a better shot in the Southwest. But when I look at Tallarico's website, I still see D.C. I think those are the reasons why you'll have a tough time. Has nothing to do with him being masculine or not masculine.
We're going to leave it there. Next for us, breaking news tonight, new strikes in Iran as the U.S. retaliates for the downed Apache helicopter. It comes as a Republican compares Trump to Charlie Brown in this war. That's next. Breaking tonight, the U.S. military has launched a new wave of retaliatory strikes against Iran after Iran downed a U.S. Apache helicopter. In response, Iran says that it's launched missiles and drones against American targets. President Trump earlier posting that both pilots were safe and uninjured before warning of the pending retaliation. This new attack comes after Trump is again insisting that a deal is right around the corner. In fact, by CNN's Aaron Blake's count, Trump has claimed that a deal was imminent or Iran was desperate to cut one at least 38 times since the start of this war. Here's just a small sample.
We have major points of agreement. I think we're going to end it. They want to make a deal so badly. I do see a deal in Iran.
I think it's close to over. Yeah, I mean, I view it as very close to over.
It's looking very good that we're going to make a deal with Iran, and it's going to be a good deal. This process should go very quickly. We're going to end that war very quickly. They want to make a deal so badly. We're in the final throes of what will be a very, very good deal that will not allow in any way, shape, or form nuclear weapons, etc. And the Strait will open up right away. It'll open up immediately upon signing, which could be in 2 or 3 days.
But some lawmakers in his own party are growing tired of all of this spin, and they're questioning whether Iran has the upper hand here.
Look, I'm starting to feel like we're Charlie Brown and Iran is Lucy, and every time we go kick the ball, it's been taken away. You know, we're close to a deal. We're 2 days from a deal. We're 3 days from a deal, and it's not happening. And right now, they think they're playing us. I happen to agree with them. I think they are playing us, and I think that we need to take a little bit more direct action.
TW, I mean, is he wrong about that? Because it seems like the only person who really talking about a deal is Trump, and he seems desperate for one, and the Iranians are not that interested.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen the Ayatollah on camera since the bombing. So, yeah, the only person on TV is Trump talking about it. First of all, I'm thrilled that the Apache helicopter pilots are safe. I am happy that we are talking about peace and not talking every day about men and women in harm's way. It's in boots on the ground. But I think Jimenez has a point. Iran is not to be trusted. They are the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. They have the blood of hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans on their hand. They are a net evil to the world. And I'm glad that President Trump is talking about getting themselves a deal, America a deal, where they no longer can have access to a nuclear weapon. And according to reporting we've heard today, it really is about the timeline of what that taking down of all their nuclear arsenal looks like. I hope that is the case.
But
we don't have a lot of
obliterated it
information to
last
go
year.
through.
The White House said we obliterated what was left of the nuclear program that didn't exist
Correct,
to begin
but-
with. And anybody that said otherwise was fake news. And that's still on the White House's website as of today.
Yeah, so and there are
So
other
isn't it
there's
gone?
other places
We
that
can
we're
go home
supposed to
now
know
and keep more
about.
of our men and women out of harm's way, right?
Unfortunately, we can't do that because that is still underground. It could be recovered. We need
The
to
only way
So-
the only way to get the nuclear, the enriched uranium, is to put boots on the ground.
Yes.
And so
been
what
an
is being
agreement to do it.
negotiated right now is not even a deal of a nuclear framework. It's a deal to get a deal. It's to open the Strait of Hormuz, to start allowing some of those tankers to come out. And all of this, while this is happening, and we were talking about this earlier, is, this is a very active war zone. I mean, I think what's getting lost here is the fact that Iran used a couple thousand, $20,000 drone to shoot down a multi-million-dollar aircraft shows that not only do they have control over the strait, but they retain very strong capabilities, not just in the strait, but I think across the country. And so I think to Abby's point earlier of are we closer to a deal? It's I think there's hope that we're always closer to a deal, but to have that come to fruition, the JCPOA took 18 months to get there.
Americans would not be, faulted for thinking they're being strung along here.
Right.
J.D. Vance was asked about this by CBS. Here's his response.
You say very close. How soon? Could the deal happen before the midterm elections?
Oh, absolutely. No, I think we're going to know a lot before the midterm elections. Look, I think that the deal could happen in the next week, but the deal could also happen months from now.
Are the Iranians stringing President Trump along, in your view?
No, I don't think so. Again, I think their system takes a long time to reach consensus. I always hear people ask me, do you trust the Iranians? And what the president has said is, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody. What I do trust is my own ability to negotiate. I trust our administration's ability to negotiate, and I trust the enforcement provisions that we're going to get in place.
Could be next week, could be months from now. It seems like they don't really have any idea how long this is going to take, in part because they have underestimated the timeline from the very beginning.
Yeah, Trump is definitely in over his head. This 4 to 6 week timeline is now over 100 days, and we've had all of the costs of this with none of the benefits. We've gotten zero political concessions on the nuclear question, on IRGC, on the regime change question. We have made no progress on that while spending over $100 billion. Americans are struggling with high gas prices, with the economy, and yet we are being lied to on TV by people who are saying this war is almost over. Every time we go to war with a country that starts with IRA, it ends up in a disaster where we make very little progress. We hit a grinding counterinsurgency, and now Iran seems to be waging asymmetric warfare in the form of the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump was promised that this would go like Venezuela, where if you chop off the head, the rest of the body falls in line. It did not work like that. The IRGC is different. And
That didn't happen in Venezuela either.
Well, he was pitched that it
Delcy
would
is
work.
still a continuation of the Maduro
The regime
apparatus.
didn't change in Venezuela, but at least he was able to get out of it cleanly after Maduro was captured.
Well,
In
it was
this
a
case,
strategic,
it's very different.
right? It was a strategic, targeted operation versus this was a. I think
He was
it's
sold it as
really
by
hard.
Venezuela.
Yeah, he was sold on the idea that he would be able to topple the regime very quickly, and that the people of Iran would rally around the United States and they would take back their government, as he said, on February 28th when he gave that press conference. And the reality is that Iran's playbook is to run down the clock. It's to continue to string this out. It is in their interest.
All right, let's hit pause here. We'll take a quick break and come back on the other side, and you can respond, TW. We'll be right back. Just over 100 days of this war with Iran, and the American people oppose it. And Caroline, you're a MAGA Republican, but you oppose it too, which I think might surprise a lot of people. A Reuters poll just found 56% of Republicans say that the war is worth it. That's low, considering that Trump has, 80%, 85% support among Republicans. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me what I've known from the polling from the very beginning, which was they said, oh, all of MAGA supports this, and then there were polls that broke down and said non-MAGA. Well, let me explain what non-MAGA is. It used to be in the Republican Party you had two wings. You had the MAGA wing and then the non-MAGA wing, which was like the establishment Republicans that Trump had overtaken. So these were the neocons. These were people who were very supportive of the actions that the Trump administration is taking right now. Non-MAGA now means people who have left MAGA, who have left the MAGA movement because they don't feel like this war is fulfilling the promise that the president said at his second inaugural address, which is that we will not just be judged by the battles that we win and the wars that we end, but also perhaps by the wars that we never start. So I, too, am glad that our pilots are safe. I have a lot of questions about our KC-135s that went down for the first time in American combat. I have a lot of questions about our F-15 pilots who went down over Iran, who we've still never met. We've had the astronauts at the White House. We've never heard from our F-15 pilots. It's time for us to go home. We don't need to wait for a deal. The president can have a huge political rebound by just leaving. And by the way, it's also affecting not just how the Republican Party views President Trump, but how our country is viewed on the world stage. I was just in Istanbul, Turkey, which is a NATO ally that shares a border with Iran. And I just asked people, because I'm an American and I haven't talked to people abroad about how they view our country. And I said, does this war make you respect America more or less as a global force for good? And every single person I talked to sincerely said no. They said, you've killed 165 school children. This isn't bringing us closer to peace. This doesn't help us view America in a better light. And so it's time to go. It's time to come home.
TW?
I support the idea of preventing Iran, the greatest global sponsor of terrorism, from getting a nuclear weapon. I think our men and women in uniform have performed valiantly, and they did a tremendous job in the early days of this campaign in Iran. And I don't believe the commander-in-chief, any commander-in-chief, Democrat or Republican, has the luxury of looking at political polls before they do something to defend our country. We've seen that over the decades. Wars weren't popular. They became popular when we were successful. They're privy to intelligence that we aren't. And Sabrina, to your point that you brought up earlier, so when you brought up earlier, when you said that a cheap drone shooting down an expensive plane, I understand that is a massive problem and unsustainable in the long term. But I think it misses the bigger point, too, that our military has a lot of capacity as well. And we're also inflicting a lot of military pain, economic pain on Iran. So I want to see it end quickly, obviously, but I think the goal of making sure they don't get a nuclear weapon, and we can,
polls are downstream from Trump's decision-making, which I think is really what people are questioning. It's not that Trump should be reacting to the polls, but I think people are upset that he seemingly walked into a war without understanding the consequences. Or not just for the United States, but for the whole globe, for the region, for our strategic interests in the region.
I think it was, this was a war that he walked into because it was a war of choice. He made this decision. He did not lay out the case to the American public, and he could have. He could have, before he went to war on February 28th, he could have used the State of the Union to explain to the people why we need to do this, why we need to do it right now, and the imminent, quote, imminent threat that Iran posed to the American public. And to your point, last year, around this time, we were talking about how Operation Midnight Hammer obliterated Iran's nuclear program. So if we obliterated Iran's nuclear program, why are we going to war with Iran? And now we have been talking about how long this war has dragged out for. How many more hundreds of days are we going to be sitting here? J.D. Vance says it's going to wrap up any day to maybe a few months from now. I think we can all agree we've blown past the timeline that this administration set for itself.
Yeah, I want to just make one more point on that. You are totally right. This should have been sold a lot better. There should have been a larger lead up to it. I completely am with you. But I also don't think J.D. Vance is wrong with the last bit of what he said. He said it takes a long time to get the communications going. Sure. Why? Because we took out their first and second string.
We replaced
one
Ayatollah with a younger version who is a religious martyr.
And we don't know where he is. The question is, none of us at this table are aware of who the decision makers are, the people in the White House are.
These are strategic decisions. You could call them decisions.
I agree.
You could call them mistakes that were made in this conflict. It has not worked out well for us that we decided to take out all the people that we thought we could talk to.
And
that hasn't worked
we'll
out
see
well.
how it
that's the
ends.
reason why a president's temperament is so important. You know, in the first term, it was very obvious that a lot of the moves that he was making early on was about Obama and doing things that were anti-Obama, and the deal with Iran was one of those things. And I'm not quite sure if he had a proper vetting of all the ramifications when he decided to rip up the deal, but he knew it had Obama's name on it, and that was good enough. I think we're seeing the fact that he tends to make decisions based upon how he's feeling in the moment, which is fine when you're campaigning, which might even be fine when you're endorsing someone for a primary and you're not thinking about the general election, but it's not fine when it comes to war. And the fact that he's so flimsy with it, and the fact that he talks about eradicating a 2,500-year-old civilization, I mean, it's irresponsible. And so the temperament of a president, you know, for the next time we go around, yes, we want someone who's strong. Yes, you want someone who's going to fight for the American people and all the good things. But the temperament matters in these moments.
I actually fully agree with that, and I hope, actually, that the deal that comes out of this, at the end of it, does not look like the Obama deal, but a lot better.
All right, next for us, the panel's going to give us their nightcaps comeback edition. We'll be right back. It's been nearly 4 years since Serena Williams competed in a professional tennis match, and today the 44-year-old Williams makes her return in a doubles match in London, and she won. So, for tonight's News Nightcap, which legend do you think wouldn't miss a beat if they returned? Caroline, you're first.
My queen, Celine Dion, who my heart will always go on and on and on for.
Cosign, 1,000%. Go ahead.
I want to see former President Barack Obama run for a third non-consecutive term. We're going to see the Obama Kennedy Center. We're going to see Obama's faces on the buildings, and it's going to be amazing.
Okay, Elsie.
I'm a sports fan. I want to see Aaron Donald come out of retirement, play alongside Myles Garrett for the LA Rams.
All right.
I want to see the Spice Girls come back. They were my favorite girl group, but they're still the best one. So I want to see the Spice Girls come back.
What you really want?
That's what I really want.
Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr. I want to see him come back and lead the 2028 Olympic flag football team for America, added to his 6 rings.
All right, everybody, thank you very much. Thanks for watching Newsnight. Laura Coates Live starts right now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Coates. On this busy election night in America, where all eyes are now fixated on Maine in a showdown that could decide control of the Senate. Democrats have officially picked scandal-plagued Graham Plattner as their nominee. He is the progressive oyster farmer and combat veteran, a political newcomer who's made some Democrats uneasy over his past personal controversies, and he addressed some of those controversies in his speech tonight.
Redemption is not just some simple or easy destination. It's a journey. I've made mistakes in my life, mistakes that I regret, that I live with, and that I continue to learn from. And I'm still far from perfect. But every day, I wake up and I try to be a little bit better and a little bit kinder than I was the day before. And if you give me the chance, I will be a senator for the people who cannot afford to buy a senator.
Plattner will take on Republican Senator Susan Collins in November. Now, Republicans need her in order to keep her seat to have a chance at keeping control of the Senate. But tonight was not really about whether Plattner would win his primary. Democrats are watching how he wins. His most high-profile challenger, Governor Janet Mills, suspended her Senate campaign in April. But her name, it was still on the ballot. And votes for her, they still count. So the number of votes Mills pulls could be a warning sign for Plattner, a sign that some Democrats aren't sold on their nominee, even in a race they badly want to win. Well, right now, he's at about 71%, with about 44% of the vote in. My team political analysts are here with me at the table for the hour to go through all of it. But first, I want to go to Alex Seitz-Wald in Camden, Maine. He is one of the top political reporters in Maine, covering this election as deputy editor of the Midcoast Villager. Alex, so good to see you. I mean, look, 44% of the votes in. Plattner got 71%. The math is obviously mathin', But what is that signal so far?
Well, I think if Plattner finishes the night around 72%, he's got to be feeling pretty good with that. Also, the gubernatorial candidate that he supported, Troy Jackson, has been overperforming, and I think he's got to feel pretty good about that. That said, you know, that 20% of Janet Mills supporters, if you're voting for Janet Mills at this point, that is a protest vote. And I talked to a lot of Democrats who said they were going to rank Janet Mills as a protest vote. So I think it would make sense for him to concentrate a lot of his efforts between now and November on that segment of Democratic primary voters to make sure they stay inside the party and don't vote for Susan Collins, because she does have this track record of being able to peel off Democratic voters. And that's how she wins re-election, you know, time and time and again. And I think his speech tonight was an attempt to move in that direction, to shift the focus from him to Collins and to remind Democrats and Mainers why so many of them have wanted to replace her for so long.
Just to be specific, they're protesting the scandal or something else?
Yeah, they're protesting the scandals, the questions about Graham Plattner. They just don't feel good about Graham Plattner. And I've talked to a lot of Democratic voters who said they've, especially women, who feel they are in this difficult situation. As one voter put it to us, I feel sickened that I have to vote for him. So most of them will vote for him, but they don't love that. They feel compelled to.
CNN's Arlette Saenz caught up with voters at the polls earlier today, and here's what some Democrats had to say about Plattner and also Janet Mills. Listen to this.
I supported Janet Mills, even though I know she dropped out of the race. And I couldn't honestly support Plattner, even though some of the things that he says are really good.
Why did you think she was the only viable candidate in this race?
Because we don't want a Democratic Trump in that office for our state.
In my opinion, everyone has a little bit of like baggage, and it seems like for what he really stands for, and it seems like he's really trying to make a difference in Maine, I was okay with voting for him.
So what do you think? I mean, given the variety of answers, obviously this is just a small group of people, but can the Plattner campaign succeed in November ultimately against Susan Collins without the Democrats who did not vote for him today or may continue not to feel like they can?
It would be very difficult to. He would have to find a lot of voters that have not previously come out. Maine is one of the highest turnout states in the country, so there's not a lot of extra juice to squeeze, so to speak, in bringing new voters to the polls. So I do think he really needs to concentrate on bringing those voters back into the fold. Look, a lot of people look at Maine and they know it's a blue state. They see that it hasn't voted for a Republican president since 1988, and they assume Susan Collins will be easy to beat. But that's just not the case. She's one of the last politicians in America who can every single time win over split ticket voters. She did it in 2008, she did it in 2014, and she did it in 2020 when she won by 9 percentage points against a non-controversial, well-qualified Democrat who outspent her 2-1. So any Democrat is going to have their work cut out for them against Susan Collins. And the types of voters that really make the difference for her are older, educated women, moderates. And that's who I think Plattner is going to have to be focusing on between now and November.
Really insightful. Alex Seitz-Wall, thank you so much. Joining me now at the table, an all-star panel of campaign veterans, CNN political commentators Brad Todd, Karen Finney, and Xochitl Hinojosa, whose sister is running as a Democrat for governor of Texas, and CNN senior political commentator Scott Jennings as well. I mean, Karen, let me begin with you, because that was a really important note in terms of the track record of success for Susan Collins in Maine, even against a non-controversial Democratic candidate. Given where we are right now in terms of Plattner's controversies, yet the voters don't take issue with them fully, is this a cakewalk for a Democrat or Susan Collins?
Oh, nothing is a cakewalk for Democrats. I'm going to say that every day of Election Day and hope my Democrats are listening. Look, I think what Alex was just talking about is part of why Susan Collins has had such staying power. However, what we've seen in the last couple of years, independent of how you feel about the Democrats in the race, she's been underwater in the polling, and people have been angry with her. I remember very clearly when she voted against the Women's Health Protection Act, which was seen as one of the best chances to protect women after the fall of Roe v. Wade, people in her state were furious, and her numbers started tanking then. So the fact that she's not, a monster, which is the Republican talking point. Democrats are not saying that. But she is vulnerable, and that is why this race was seen as a potential pickup this time around.
The establishment has been under a microscope and under attack, the incumbents in a variety of ways. I mean, listen to what Plattner had to say to the so-called political establishment tonight.
Now, the national pundits, the political establishment, they keep looking for that one story, that one headline, that one moment in my life that they can define the campaign by. But in trying so hard to understand me, they failed to understand that this is not about me at all. This is a movement about us.
Why are you chuckling, Scott?
Because when you're as damaged as this guy, I guess I would also say it's not really about me, because if it's about him, they're in real trouble. It sort of makes me laugh. They're looking for one story. They were looking for one, and they found like 20. But let's just start with the tattoo. Democrats have spent 10 years here and everywhere else calling every Republican from Donald Trump on down a Nazi sympathizer, and a fascist. And tonight, the Democratic Party sent a message. You know what? Nazi tattoo, perfectly fine with us. That is what they are now saddled with. The campaign is about him. There is not one story. There is a troubling list of behavioral issues on this guy. His entire narrative is a lie. They're not going to be able to take the focus off of Graham Plattner.
But Donald Trump is exactly the same, and somehow he seems to win. And
Graham Plattner's on the ballot.
But on the tattoo, though, the difference between he and Donald Trump is
that he has a tattoo and Trump doesn't?
Trump is perfectly happy welcoming Nazis up to the White House.
Come on,
that being said, Graham Plattner, where I think Plattner's problems, you and I have talked about this before, he's talked about the tattoo. He's tried to say, look, this is what my life was like as a 20-something in the infantry. This is what I learned.
Well, he says he didn't know that it was.
Until after it was a problem in his campaign.
Hold on. In the longer interview, when he said that, he talked a lot about what that culture was like. What I think the problem that he had, and I think it's why there were a lot of women behind him tonight, the problem was
good thing they were behind him and not in front of him.
That, well, you could say that. Let's ask E. Jean Carroll how she feels about being anywhere in a dark space.
I want you to
Donald
finish
Trump.
your point, because it's interesting.
So I think the challenge that Plattner has had is the way he responded when this information came out was very different. That sort of, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to tell you my story, I'm going to tell you. That just fell off brand. And now it appears that the voters of Maine are okay with it. Yeah. They've made their peace with it. But we'll see if that
hold on. The Democratic primary.
I want to ask this question. I want to hear your point. But one of the things he talked about, this is not about me, it's about them, it's a movement. That did harken back to some of the statements that Donald Trump said in the campaign, as he talked about, they're not really after me, they're after you. I'm standing in the way and in between. There was some reminiscence comment that I think he was drawing a parallel to, whether he meant to or not. Will that work here?
Oh, I think part of what is attractive about Graham Plattner to Democrats is that Republicans say he's awful. And I think Democrats are attracted to the badness. They want a mercenary who they can send to Washington who will use no morals, no scruples, no anything. I think that's part of the appeal. But, tonight, Graham Plattner...
Wait, hold on. Is that because you think Democrats have been accused for so long of playing checkers while others have been playing chess, and now Democratic voters want somebody to meet the moral high ground?
Yes, I think that Sarah Gideon was the opposite. Sarah Gideon was an establishment Democrat who lost to Susan Collins in 2020, who was a state legislator who played by the rules. They want the opposite of that this time. And so badness is part of his attraction to them. But tonight was just Democratic primary voters. Karen says Maine has made peace with it. Only Maine Democrats have. Maine Democratic voters. Democratic voters. But Maine. But here's the thing. Maine has 34% of its voters are registered Democrats. 30 are Republicans. That means you can't win without half the independents, effectively. That tonight said nothing about that. And Susan Collins has a great appeal to Maine independents. She voted against before the Affordable Care Act under Barack Obama. She voted for Barack Obama's stimulus bill. She voted for Ketanji Brown Jackson, Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor. She voted against repealing the ACA. She is the most independent. She is the most independent senator of both parties.
But what I'll say about this is that what it seems to have happened is there's something about Graham Plattner, what he said tonight, that's right. I mean, there is a lot of talk about what has happened, and I disagree with his actions. I do not think that the party should be defending him. but it seems like the people of Maine are potentially on a road to electing him. And it is national pundits and others that have been talking about the allegations instead of affordability, which I think is a big problem for Democrats, because that's what we should be talking about, lowering prices for Americans, and instead of his New York Times allegations. But I think that the reason why he is doing well in the state and will probably continue to do well is there's this anti-incumbent sentiment that is happening right now. People don't want more of the same. They don't want Susan Collins anymore. Now, they might not love Plattner here, but they're willing to vote for him to take a chance. And I will say, the Democratic Party is very different than the Republican Party. Democratic Party, many people have come out to speak out against Graham Plattner and to talk about how the allegations are terrible. And you know what? I hope we don't see anything else on him. And if we continue to see, I don't think that Democrats should be pouring money in Maine. I think that they should be pouring money in places like Iowa and Texas and other places that we can win. But the difference between the Democratic Party and Republican Party is that the Republican Party, no matter what, will still stand by people like Ken Paxton, who is deeply flawed, like Donald Trump. All of these people, they will hold their nose and they will support them and pour money in, versus Democrats will not do that.
Are you saying the distinction that, hold on a second, are you saying, excuse me 1 second, are you saying, because I think some people might interpret what you've said as a distinction without a difference, that both are holding their nose and compartmentalizing behavior, and that Democrats are different from Republicans for doing just that? Is your point that they are reacting to what Republicans have done and now they are playing a different game, or you think it's qualitatively different?
Well, I do think that there have been some Democrats that have spoken out against Plattner, and if something else comes out, I will say that I do not see a lot of people in the party supporting him and sending money to me.
Let me play what a super PAC. Let me play what a PAC. I want you to respond to this, both of you, please. A super PAC supporting Senator Susan Collins released a new ad. Surprise, surprise. And guess who features prominently? Watch.
Graham Plattner blamed women for getting raped. Who says something like that? Plattner said women should take some responsibility for themselves and not get so effed up they wind up having sex with someone they don't mean to. What's wrong with this guy?
Plattner said to avoid rape, women should act like an adult for F's sake. He's an awful person.
Graham Plattner is dangerous.
I would never vote for Graham Plattner.
Meanwhile, Plattner is calling Susan Collins spineless and corrupt, going after a record, and that she is only bipartisan when it doesn't matter. Obviously, we've got an ugly Senate race ahead.
You know, Sochi, you said something that I think actually is the next thing here. What if something else comes out? I mean, there's all sorts of discussion behind the scenes here in politics in Washington that we're just at the tip of the iceberg on Graham Plattner. We haven't even touched on the fact that he had an account on this Kick platform, which is basically known as a child sex exploitation platform out there. That's not been explained.
Wait, hold on. He has not been accused of child sexual assault, exploitation, or anything like that. I know, but the intimation when you say "I'm just saying" suggests that he is on a site where he is perusing in that. I'm telling you, there's no allegation in that realm. But finish your point.
My point is, you got that laying out there. There are other women that we haven't heard from yet that apparently the New York Times refused to talk. They're going to talk, I assume, at some point. There is more. And right now, you've got Democrats going out on a limb, and Graham Plattner and his background is the one holding the saw. I wouldn't be out on that limb too much if I were.
But you know, Graham Plattner was reckless before these allegations. He said last summer that if you disagreed with an elected official, you should not let them dine in peace in public. So he's a reckless. People do reckless things. We'll find out more.
The big question of everyone out there, I thought the tip of the iceberg didn't really matter when you had others who were doing a lot. We'll see if the voters think so. Stand by, everyone. The panel's with me for the hour. I almost said 4 more hours. No, they're not. But they'll be answering your questions and comments a little later on. Send them to us at cnn.com/AskLaura. Or you know what, text us 818-972-7272. Just make sure you include a first name in your city or state. The number again on your screen, 818-972-7272. But first, we've got the breaking news out of Iran. Trump ordering a retaliatory strike after he says Iran downed a U.S. helicopter. Did the elusive Iran deal just even get harder? And later, our question for tonight, are Republicans still claiming the election is rigged now that Steve Hilton has made it to the November runoff in California's governor's race? The panel takes it on next. Breaking tonight, U.S. Central Command says the military has now completed a fresh round of strikes against Iran, targeting sites near the Strait of Hormuz. The president says the strikes were in response to Iran downing a U.S. Apache helicopter. He is telling ABC News tonight, I believe the response should be very strong, very powerful, and that's what this one is. A U.S. official says the strikes were meant as a warning shot to Iran, and they will not impede negotiations to end the war. But Iran is responding, launching drone attacks toward U.S. targets in the region. Their foreign minister says our powerful armed forces will leave no attack or threat unanswered. Scott Tangoshi Hinojosa are back, along with retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery and lead global security analyst from Washington Post Intelligence, Josh Rogan. Okay, a lot to unpack. Admiral, I want to begin with you because I wonder if you're worried that this conflict may be escalating to a new level we have not yet seen.
Yeah, so I think the president's trying hard not to let that happen. He's trying to keep a lid on it by saying out loud proportionate responses. I think he's probably trimming the CENTCOM strike packages to, they're more aggressive than last week when the weapons missed. You know, they fired at a number of ships, nothing hit. We did a proportionate response against radars. I think when we look at battle damage tomorrow, we'll see radars plus missile sites plus stowage plus some command and control, but still all about the maritime targets in the Bandar Abbas, Strait of Hormuz area. In other words, proportionate in target selection, if not numbers, with the idea of trying to keep a lid so he can move forward with what he hopes is an opportunity for a deal, which may or may not be realistic.
I mean, you have to wonder whether this is going to, I mean, how could it not impact at least the conversations about negotiation? But here's the vice president on a timeline.
How soon could the deal happen before the midterm elections?
Oh, absolutely. No, I think we're going to know a lot before the midterm elections. Look, I think that the deal could happen in the next week, but the deal could also happen months from now.
Okay, well, here's what the president has had to say about this as well. Listen.
They're begging to make a deal.
I think they want to make a deal very badly.
Iran is dying to make a deal.
We're going to end that war very quickly. They want to make a deal so badly. We're close to a very good deal. We're in the final throes of what will be a very, very good deal.
So we've heard from Trump more than like 38 times. It's just around the corner. You heard Vice President J.D. Vance say something different. Which one has the more realistic timeline based on your reporting?
None of the timelines offered are realistic because none of them match the facts that we're seeing on the ground. In the last week, we saw the Iranians attack northern Israel with ballistic missiles. They bombed the Kuwaiti airport. They just attacked Bahrain. They shot a U.S. A helicopter out of the sky. And Trump's response is, no big deal. He didn't want to respond. He didn't want Israel to respond. He said the Kuwaiti attack was no big deal. He didn't want to respond to the helicopter attack either until he was convinced, reportedly, by his generals today to do this limited attack. So Trump's message is, don't believe your eyes. Everything's fine. We're very close. That's obviously not true. And what Vance offered is a slightly more honest a picture, which is that this could take several months. The problem is that Vance doesn't seem to think that's a bad thing. He doesn't seem to realize that Americans are suffering, our allies are getting bombed, our alliances are getting weakened, and the war is dragging our economy into an abyss. And just to say it could take a couple of days or a week or several months is a completely unacceptable answer to the American people after they entered a war with no justification, no legal explanation, and no strategy and no realistic plan for getting us out of this thing.
Is Vance's message the stronger one for the American public, more well received, or, I mean, is that not even the question?
Well, I think the president has been asked questions about politics in the middle of this, and he's been pretty honest. And he said, I'm not going to let politics interrupt what I think I'm doing for the purpose of national security. That's a pretty honest answer, and I think actually the correct one that you want out of a commander-in-chief. What Vance is saying there, I think, is basically true. You could get something now. It could take a long time. The third option, of course, is you never get anything. And in conversations that I've had with senior administration officials, they've always, even in the calls where they've been projecting some optimism, they've always said, look, it's possible this all falls apart. To Josh's point, I mean, we have seen a lot of provocations from the Iranians lately. And I think the president has shown some restraint. I'm glad we struck back today. I mean, truthfully, this afternoon, I didn't want a proportionate response. I wanted a disproportionate response because you can't let the enemy, attack American troops in theater like this and let them feel like that they can they can do this with
Yeah.
impunity.
Well,
I
Admiral,
think
I want to ask. I want to hear from you as well. But Admiral, I mean, the idea of a disproportionate response. Talk to me about the evaluation thought process in that, number one. But also, if Iran is able to retaliate, does that undercut Trump's claim that the military in Iran has been destroyed?
So first, on disproportionate response, that would be attacking like economic targets. You know what the Israelis did the other night when they hit a petrochemical plant. You know, attacking gas fields, things like that. But if you do that, it is going to go into a full-scale war pretty quickly because they probably still, even if the president's right, they only have 20% of their ballistic missiles left, which I tend to believe him more than the 80% that you might hear. 20% of 3,000 is about 600, 700. That's a lot of ballistic missiles they can still fire. And they probably won't waste them on Israel anymore since Israel's shooting them down. They'll put them into Jordan, into Saudi Arabia, into UAE, Qatar and Kuwait.
Yeah, I just think it's bizarre to say that the president is being honest when you just played that whole clip of him saying several times, 37 times, that we were days away from a deal. Obviously, that wasn't true. Obviously, it's not true. Obviously, he's not being honest with the American people about that. And let's look at the other things that he's saying. He's saying that we've completely decimated their military, that they're about to give up all of the nuclear dust, that they really want a deal. None of those things are true. And that's the gaslighting that we're getting from the president. It's war is peace. It's about as clear as Orwell would have described.
Well, and to that point, I think the American people are losing. They don't really trust the president at this point. They can't take his word. He believed it. He said at the beginning this would only take a few weeks. You're right. We might not get anything out of this. And from everything that we can tell, there was no clear plan to get out of this in the first place. And I think the American people are starting to see that. If we head into the midterm election and there's no deal, people are going to be hurting regardless past the midterm election, maybe well into next year, and Trump has nothing to show for it. This is not only a big problem for his party, for Congress, this is a problem for Donald Trump's presidency, and it is about to become the lame duck president moving forward.
More ahead. Admiral Montgomery and Josh, thank you both so much. Scott and Sochi, stick around because up next, remember when Trump said they're cheating the vote count in California? Well, Republican Steve Hilton just advanced to November, so what's the excuse now? Plus,
to disrupt the momentum that they had built just because you want to attend the game, I call narcissistic and selfish.
Stephen A. Smith digging in on blaming the Knicks' loss on Trump. The president now firing back with some insults, and Stephen A. will be with us tonight to respond. More election results tonight in California. The governor's race is now set. Republican Steve Hilton is advancing to the general election to face Democrat and former Health Secretary Javier Becerra. Hilton is a former Fox News host who's been endorsed by the president. Both men are vying to replace outgoing Governor Gavin Newsom. My panel is back with me now. Sochi, Hilton believes that he has a chance because of frustration that Californians have against Democratic candidates, but he's also been endorsed by Trump. So which is going to be prioritized by voters?
He doesn't have a chance.
He doesn't.
He does not have a chance. Listen, California is a blue state. It is one with a very heavy Latino population. That is one of the reasons why we have Becerra, who ran for governor and won in a very, very crowded ticket, because they carry a lot of the vote in the state. And so I do think that this is now a choice election. This is not an election between two Democrats. It's between a Democrat and a Republican in a blue state, and it'll be the choice between Javier Becerra, who has been in Congress and delivered for his constituents, versus Hilton, who has not done that and has been endorsed by Trump. And now this race, and Javier Becerra will make clear the choice between the two.
Isn't there a third-party issue, though, and the third party being a figurative one, and that is claims of election fraud that now the voters have to contend with? Is that going to impact Republicans who are being told by their president that this is fraudulent? Oh, except for Hilton?
Hilton doesn't think that.
He's stressing himself.
Well, surely we could all agree that California's system is crazy. The fact that in a modern country it takes 2 weeks to count the ballots. I'm from Tennessee. 60% of our votes early. We count them all on election day. They get them all done. And so, it is possible. I don't know what it is with the California Civil Service Union that stops them from doing this, but it undermines confidence in the electorate. People need to be able to see the election results in a very timely manner, California state employees just refuse to let it happen.
But is that confidence internal or external? I mean, I hear it from non-Californians.
I was going to say, having grown up in California, Californians are weird. So, like, you're trying to apply a standard that doesn't apply. I mean, come on.
You said it, not us.
I said it. I'm happy to say it. I mean, I went to Berkeley High School. Weird. Look, but I think, I mean, to Californians, they've just accepted this is how it goes. And with the understanding that, of course, the rest of the country sort of flips out. I agree with Sochi. It is a blue state, and now that the choice is between a Republican and a Democrat, it is much better for Javier Becerra, who also was a former attorney general, who did an excellent job in California. I think the challenge, though, he is going to have to make the case, particularly because he's running against someone who will be well-funded. He's going to have to raise the dollars and make a strong case for what is he going to do to move California forward from where they are now. You don't have to, attack the current governor to do that, but people in this environment where people want something different, even if you are in the same party, you better have something new to say.
What is the strategy for Hilton going forward, knowing that, as Sochi has pointed out, a Trump endorsement may very well be a liability statewide?
Well, I mean, the strategy is obviously to ask the correct question, which is, are you going to continue to vote for running this beautiful place into the absolute ground? I mean, California is a disaster. Cost of living is a disaster out there. It's more for everything because of the state's policies. Education system is a disaster. Thing after thing after thing is a disaster. And the Democrats have nominated Becerra, who a really smart Democratic operative told me a couple of weeks ago was probably the weakest link in the Biden cabinet. And and she's sitting right here. And so,
she's trying honestly, to giggle away that statement. Do you have amnesia right now, Sochi?
I'll address it.
I mean, look, the Democrats have nominated someone to replace their worst governor, someone who was the worst cabinet member in the worst Democrat presidential administration in modern history. This is not a recipe for positive outcomes.
So I will say that, I mean, the entire ticket, I think people were very underwhelmed by it. And I do think that Javier Becerra is going to have to put some really smart people in with him if he does win, because this is a state that will be targeted by Trump. He needs to be fighting. And we haven't seen him do that so far, but I have hope that if he puts the right people around him, that he will be able to do that.
I have good people around me. We got your questions coming up later in the hour. We'll get to them as well, so stand by, everyone. But first,
you need a high IQ. I'm not sure that Stephen has that.
Back at Stephen A. Smith for blaming the Knicks' loss on his, quote, selfish attendance at MSG. Stephen A. with me next to respond. In less than 24 hours, the New York Knicks will take the court at Madison Square Garden for Game 4 of the NBA Finals against the San Antonio Spurs. But this time, President Trump will not be there. He was booed during the national anthem before last night's Game 3, which the Knicks did lose 115 to 111. Now, Trump is a lifelong Knicks fan, but other fans like Stephen A. Smith warned Trump to stay away from the Garden.
If the New York Knicks lose Game 3, this is on Donald Trump.
Mr. President, ESPN commentator Stephen A. Smith, who has talked about running for president, said he would blame you if the Knicks lost the game. How do you respond to that?
I think he's a nice guy, but you need a certain aptitude to run for president. You need a high IQ. I'm not sure that Stephen has that. I don't think he does, actually.
Well, here to respond, Stephen A. Smith himself, host of Straight Shooter on SiriusXM and First Take on ESPN. Stephen A., you say that you're not offended by Trump's comments, but you went in on the president today. You even accused him of sleeping at the game. I don't know if it's an accusation, much as an observation. But what do you want to tell the president tonight?
Well, if he's not going to show up to Game 4, thank you very much for not being hard-headed this time and listening, because you disrupted the mojo that the New York Knicks fan base was building for this team to come home to after winning Games 1 and 2 in San Antonio during the NBA Finals. It has been 27 years since the New York Knicks have been to a Finals. It has been 32 years since they've had a chance to win a championship, because there was no way in hell they were going to win a championship in 1999 against David Robinson and Tim Duncan when Patrick Ewing was out with a broken wrist. And obviously it's been 53 years since they won a championship. Donald Trump was around. Donald Trump is not lying. He's been a lifelong New York Knicks fan. We saw him at the games all the time before he was running for president, all the time. He definitely is a New York Knicks fan or what have you. So he knows about the suffering. He knows what the city has gone through. And he knows the slightest thing can disrupt the momentum in the world of sports. And to me, he should have been highly sensitive to that. 6,000 to 7,000 people having to be removed or displaced, not allowed to have the watch parties outside of Madison Square Garden with that fervor, that momentum, that vibe that has been unseen by a New York Knicks fan base in decades, and you would get in the way of that. He should have been ashamed of himself for disrupting that and showing up to the game in Game 3. And I do blame him for the loss because, as far as I'm concerned, it disrupted the momentum. I'm a New York Knicks fan. Everybody knows that. So is he. So are all of us as New Yorkers. And in the world of sports, you do get a bit superstitious at times. Whatever is working, don't disrupt it. The New York Knicks won 13 straight playoff games, too shy of a record tying the Golden State Warriors of 2017. And it got ruined the moment Donald Trump showed up. Damn right I blame him. I said it before and I'm saying it again.
I understand in terms of what it is like for the fans outside who could not be at the watch parties and beyond. And of course, you've mentioned superstition. But what do you say to people who say, well, hold on, all the things you mentioned, he's a fan. It came down to how the Knicks performed, not how Trump was present. What do you say to those who look at that and say,
well,
come on?
They're obviously culpable because their on-court performance ultimately speaks volumes. But when you talk about momentum shifting, it matters. When you have a rabid fan base, go to a game back in the day when Klay Thompson and Steph Curry were playing together for the Golden State Warriors. Look at that environment inside the Oracle and tell me that didn't matter. Go to the Heatles, which they said was the short for the Beatles, when they talked about LeBron James, Chris Bosh, D. Wade and the crew in Miami, and look at what that environment was like and how intimidated it was for people to go up against them. It wasn't just your play. You feed off the adrenaline of a fan base. And none of that compared to the New York Knicks in New York City. Look at how people were in the streets acting when they won a playoff game. Because this is foreign to us. It's different. Walking into Madison Square Garden, it's different, Laura. It's not what everybody, you don't find it everywhere. And when you have that kind of momentum, it has a palpable effect. It definitely can work for you. It definitely can serve to intimidate opponents. The New York Knicks had all of that going for them. Won 13 straight playoff games. Usually when something like that is happening, you don't mess with it at all. You don't do anything different. And this man comes along and you got to have security details, shops got to be closed, watch parties got to be canceled, all of this stuff that was going on just because he wanted to be selfish and show up and disrupt their mojo. I'm not playing. Everybody else is joking around. I wasn't joking around. I was worried about them losing Game 3 because he showed up. He showed up, they lost Game 3. See what I'm saying? That's how I feel about it.
For the Knicks, one of the stars, Jalen Brunson, was asked about whether Trump was a distraction, and Stephen A. said it didn't bother the team. Listen to what he said.
Do you think it was like too many side noises? Was it a bit distracted for you guys?
Not necessarily. No matter what the narrative is or what's going on, we have to be professional and do what we have to do when we get on the court.
I will note he did say not necessarily, not no. How do you see that?
Well, Laura,
Stephen.
What is Jalen Brunson or any other player supposed to do? Well, you know what? I mean, it was a vibe out there, and the vibe wasn't there because the president showed up. So that's why I played badly. That's why I struggled. What's he supposed to do? He's supposed to admit that? I mean, the man was born at night, not last night, and I'm just being facetious because I don't know when he was born. I'm just telling you, this is what the situation is.
I got to ask you, because when the president was asked about your views, he didn't really address this. He instead went to talking about your IQ and your, what he called maybe a potential run for your presidency. I know you have not said that you are running for president, although many people have wondered, myself included. But what is your reaction to the president of the United States questioning your IQ?
He's questioned it about everybody from Maxine Waters to Hakeem Jeffries, to the Megyn Kellys of the world, the Tucker Carlsons of the world. It isn't just black folks, it's white folks too. I get it, I understand it. It's his default position when he really has no comeback because he knows as a New York Knicks fan he had no business being there. But if he really, really wants to get down to the nitty-gritty and really want to challenge me about my IQ, I welcome a sit down with him. I welcome him on the debate stage. You know, you're the president of the United States. You've joked around about circumventing the 22nd Amendment and running for a third term. Well, if you can pull off those strings, particularly the pull that you've got with the FCC or anything like that, why don't you find a way to allow me to keep my money and my job at ESPN and SiriusXM and still walk on that debate stage? I will be happy to show up against President Trump. Since you think that my IQ is questionable, you want to find out? Want some, come get some. I'll show up.
Well, the only moderator that will work would be Laura Coates. Stephen A. Smith, I'll see you there. Thank you.
There we go. There we go.
Here we go. A quick break, and then we're back to answer your questions with the panel. Oh, good. It's time for your questions. A reminder, you can always send them to us, cnn.com/AskLaura, or just text us. You got your phone with you, 818-972-7272. And my panel is back. All right, Shantae from Texas asks, Scott and Brad, why can't you guys call out with the same energy the very crooked Ken Paxton? Fellas?
I've said Ken Paxton's endorsement was a $100 million mistake. I've said he's going to be a big lift. I think it was a political mistake. John Cornyn would be a shoo-in. Ken Paxton puts the Republican majority in a lot more serious trouble.
Scott?
Call me when Ken Paxton's discovered with a Nazi tattoo. There's no equating this.
Oh, stop.
There is no equating. The man had a literal Nazi tattoo.
He's corrupt.
Literal
Paxton is
Nazi
corrupt.
tattoo.
Okay, how about both
How
of them?
is this not disqualifying on its face?
All right, well, Shantae, you just triggered something. One viewer from Ohio asked this question: how can Dems point the finger at Trump's immoral behavior and then elect a candidate like Plattner? Two wrongs don't make a right. Karen?
You know, again, I think what we're seeing is the primary voters of, my correction, of Maine are the ones who are making this decision. I would venture to guess that there are some who did not vote for Trump who will not vote for Plattner.
Henry from LA asked this about Graham Plattner: why not fight fire with fire? I'm sick of going high when the Republicans go low. Democrats better wake up to the new reality. Sochi?
I think Democrats have been fighting hard, and I think they'll continue to fight hard. I don't think that we should stand for the same thing that Republicans stand for, like protect, you know, those politicians who are corrupt or have allegations against them. But I do think that you have some candidates who are finally out there fighting against the Republican Party.
All right, let's go to Port Jefferson Station, New York. All right, this is Joshua. Here's the question. We live in a time in which the president, Supreme Court, and Congress have all had successful careers despite major scandals related to sex. Are we past the era of voters caring about these types of scandals? Let's ask everyone. Karen?
No, I don't think so. And I think one of the defining differences is obviously if violence is involved and if someone has been harmed.
Brad?
No, I think this is a big test of the Me Too movement, though. Kirsten Gillibrand, the senator from New York, really played a key role in Al Franken being taken out of the U.S. Senate. She was a leader in it. She's now driving the funding decisions for the Democrat Senatorial Campaign Committee. I really hope she will walk away from Graham Plattner like Cory Gardner walked away from Doug Jones.
Scott? Sochi?
Well, I don't view this as a sex scandal. I view this as a scandal of abuse. And again, not to continue to beat this drum too much, but Nazi tattoo on his chest that he has been proven to have lied about. I think this is not a sex scandal. It is a character scandal and an abuse scandal. I agree with what Karen said.
The proof you mean in the
But
New York Times
I
article
didn't say it
talking
was
about
an abuse
this.
scandal. But are you saying that Donald Trump is
Said
lying when he
violence.
said he didn't know
Said
that
violence is a
so-and-
different story.
No, I meant in the big picture. The question was, have we moved on from this being an issue? I was speaking in the. But my question is, did Donald Trump, was he lying when he said he didn't realize that certain individuals he's invited to Mar-a-Lago were Nazi, racist, white nationalists? He didn't know? He didn't lie?
You are never going to equate the Democratic Party nominating a loser with a Nazi tattoo
At
to
least he
anything.
tried to talk. At
If
least
you
he
want to
tried to
defend
say
it, go
something
ahead,
about
but
it.
that's on you, not the rest of us.
Okay.
Heather from Canton, Michigan, asked this question. How can Donald Trump say there was fraud in California after Steve Hilton advanced to the runoff? I hear from you, Sochi.
Great question. I have no idea. All of a sudden, it's Donald Trump says there's fraud whenever his candidate does not win, and then claims there's not fraud whenever he wins. So, you know.
I'm going to try to explain this in lightning round format. When you allow absentee ballots to be mailed on Election Day, you invite people to think they were cooked up. How do I know that? Because last week in Tennessee, the state Democratic Party had to eradicate 2 May primary elections because someone did exactly that. And so you just can't let absentee ballots be mailed in on Election Day. You just can't. They have to be in the door by the time the polls close.
But it's also every time Donald Trump and his allies lose, then it is fraud.
In a day.
That's really the only
Every
time.
day ending in
It
what?
doesn't mean absentee ballots
That's
don't lead
just
to
the only.
fraud.
Let's just say that's the only time.
All right, we go. California. Anthony from San Bernardino, California asks, will Laura Coates be Stephen A. Smith's vice presidential running mate in 2028?
Definitive. Yes.
No, her at
Me?
the top.
Oh.
Her at the top.
I was going to say,
Make him the VP.
me second
Yeah,
to a man?
no,
I never really thought about that, but I do love a front row seat as long as he does not indulge in a
We need
shaking
more
violence.
women. We need more
'Cause
women
I am
after all
not
these
one of
allegations,
those.
man. That's all I'm saying.
Thanks, everyone. Let's go wait quickly. Hold on. Tell me, New York Knicks tomorrow playing. What's happening? Do you believe Stephen A. Smith? Is it a domino hex?
Spurs.
No, Knicks, baby.
Spurs goes.
This is not about mojo. It's about shooting.
Spurs go Spurs.
Oh.
Scott?
I'm going to be for the Spurs.
Good.
I'm
Woo!
so
Okay, thanks, everyone. Alex Michelson, here's your show.
I'm Alex Michelson, live in Los Angeles. Welcome to The Story Is. The story is in Iran, where the U.S. military wrapped up what it called self-defense strikes